At my wife's 12-week ultrasound, the doctor stopped moving the wand. His hand, usually steady as a surgeon's, started shaking. He turned off the monitor, looked at me with eyes full of terror, and whispered, "Get her out of this room. Right now." I thought something was wrong with the baby. I thought we were losing the child I had waited 72 years to meet. But when my wife left the room, the doctor locked the door, grabbed my shoulder, and said, "You need to leave this hospital, and then you need to call a lawyer. You must divorce her today." I asked why. He replied, "No time to explain. You will understand when you see this." What he showed me on that screen made my blood boil. It was not a medical issue. It was a crime scene. Before I tell you how my entire life shattered in a single afternoon, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever trusted someone who turned out to be a snake in the grass. My name is Marcus Thorne. I am 72 years old, a man who built half the skyline of Chicago with my own two hands. I thought I had seen everything. I thought I was the one in control. I was wrong. The gel on Jasmine's stomach was cold. I watched her shiver slightly, a smile playing on her lips. She looked beautiful. At 34, my wife was everything a man could want. Radiant, young, full of life. She squeezed my hand, her manicured nails digging slightly into my palm. "Marcus, look," she cooed, pointing at the fuzzy gray static on the monitor. "That is our legacy. Our legacy." The word hung in the air, heavy and sweet. I had made my millions pouring concrete and bending steel. I had $15 million in the bank, a mansion in the suburbs, and a reputation as a man you do not cross. But I had no son. My first wife, God rest her soul, gave me a wonderful daughter, Maya. But Maya was soft. She married a man I could not respect. So when Jasmine told me she was pregnant, I felt like God was giving me a second chance, a final chance to raise a lion. Dr. Evans was running the wand over her belly. Evans and I go way back. We served in the same unit in Vietnam. We watched friends die in the mud. We trust each other with our lives. That is why I insisted he handle this pregnancy even though he was semi-retired. I wanted the best for my son. I watched Evans's face. I expected a smile. I expected him to slap me on the back and say, "Congratulations, you old bull, you still have it." Instead, I saw his jaw tighten. The lines around his eyes deepened. He squinted at the screen, typed something rapidly on his keyboard, and then froze. The rhythmic whooshing sound of the fetal heartbeat filled the room, but the atmosphere had turned icy. "Is everything okay, Dr. Jasmine asked, trying to sit up. Her voice had that edge of entitlement she always used when service wasn't fast enough. Evans didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the screen. "Jasmine," he said, his voice flat, "I need a urine sample, right now. Your protein levels look a bit irregular on the chart. Go to the nurse station down the hall. Ask for Nurse Betty. She is waiting for you." "But I just went before we came in," Jasmine protested. "Go," Evans barked. It was the voice of the commanding officer he used to be. "Do it for the baby," Jasmine huffed, rolling her eyes at me as if to say, "Can you believe this guy?" She wiped the gel off her stomach with a paper towel, grabbed her designer purse, the one I paid $5,000 for last week, and shimmied off the table. "I will be right back, honey," she said, blowing me a kiss. The moment the heavy door clicked shut, the air in the room changed. It felt sucked out like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks. Evans stood up and walked to the door. He turned the lock. Click. Then he turned to me. He didn't look like a doctor anymore. He looked like a soldier in a foxhole. "Marcus," he said, "what is it?" "Evans, is the baby dead?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. "The baby is fine," Evans said. "The baby is perfectly healthy." "Then what the hell is going on?" "Unlock the door. Jasmine will be back any second." He walked over to me and put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was hard, painful. "Marcus, listen to me closely. You know I would never lie to you. We survived the jungle together. I am telling you this as a brother, not a doctor. You need to file for divorce. Immediately." I laughed. It was a nervous, confused sound. "What are you talking about? Did the heat get to you? I am 72 years old. Evans, I am having a son. I am happy." He steered me toward the monitor. "Look at this." He pointed to a cluster of data on the side of the screen. "I see numbers, Evans. I am a contractor. not a geneticist. Speak English. We have new technology, Marcus, he said, his voice lowering to a whisper. It screens for genetic markers in real time. It helps us catch hereditary diseases early. So, does the boy have a defect? He has a marker, Evans said. A very specific, very rare genetic marker for Lynch syndrome. I stared at him. And what does that mean? Can we treat it? I have money, Evans. I can buy the best treatment in the world. Evans took a deep breath. Marcus, you don't have Lynch syndrome. Your medical records are clean. Jasmine doesn't have Lynch syndrome. I checked her file before you walked in. I was getting impatient. So it is a mutation. Who cares? It is a dominant trait, Marcus Evans hissed. It comes from the father. If you don't have it and she doesn't have it, then you are not the father. The world stopped spinning. The silence in the room was deafening. The only sound was the hum of the computer fan. I stared at the black and white image of the fetus. My son. Not my son. Are you sure? I asked, my voice sounding like gravel. 100%, Evans said. But that is not why I told you to run. What could be worse than this? I asked, feeling a rage building in my gut, hot and heavy like molten lead. Think, Marcus Evans said, his eyes drilling into mine. Who do we know that has Lynch syndrome? Who was bragging about it at your 4th of July barbecue last year? Who called it his aristocratic curse? The memory hit me like a shovel to the face. I was back in my backyard. The smell of ribs on the smoker, the sound of jazz playing. And there, standing by the pool holding a beer, was Kyle, my son-in-law, my daughter Maya's husband, the white boy with the slicked back hair and the smile that never quite reached his eyes. I remembered the conversation clearly. Kyle was laughing, telling a group of my business partners about his family history. Yeah, we have this thing called Lynch syndrome, he had said, puffing out his chest like it was a medal of honor. Increased cancer risk, but hey, it proves my lineage goes back to the old European courts. My blood ran cold. Kyle. I looked at Evans. He nodded grimly. He knew. He had been at that barbecue too. The baby has Lynch syndrome markers, Evans repeated. You don't. Jasmine doesn't. Kyle does. The room started to spin. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself, my wife, and my son-in-law. My mind started racing, connecting dots I had been too blind to see. The Tuesday nights. Jasmine had yoga class every Tuesday night. Kyle had his business meetings every Tuesday night. The way they looked at each other across the dinner table. The way Kyle always defended Jasmine when Maya complained about her spending. I felt nauseous. I had paid off Kyle's gambling debts 3 months ago. $300,000. I handed it to him in cash because he was crying, saying he wanted to be a better man for my daughter. I had bought Jasmine a Porsche last week because she said her back hurt from driving the sedan. I was not just a husband, I was a piggy bank, and I was a fool. I sank into the chair, my legs gave out. Marcus Evans said urgently, listen to me, if she finds out that you know she will try to take everything, in your state with your heart condition, a shock like this, they are counting on you dying, Marcus. That is the plan. I looked up at my old friend. The shock was fading. The hurt was being pushed down deep into a box where I kept my trauma from the war. What rose to the surface was something else, something cold, something hard. It was the part of me that fired incompetent foremen without blinking. It was the part of me that negotiated contracts with mafia, run unions, and won. Unlock the door, I said. Marcus, are you okay? Unlock the door. Evans, he clicked the lock. I stood up, I smoothed my jacket, I checked my reflection in the dark monitor screen. I saw an old man, yes. But I saw a dangerous man. Jasmine knocked on the door and peeked in. Is everything done? Did I miss the heartbeat? She bounced into the room, smelling of expensive perfume. My money. Everything is perfect, I said. My voice was steady, calm. Dr. Evans says the baby is strong, just like his father. Jasmine beamed and hugged me. Oh, Marcus, I am so happy. I hugged her back. I felt her heartbeat against my chest. I felt the life growing inside her. A life that was a biological weapon aimed at my legacy. Over her shoulder, I saw Evans watching me. He looked terrified. He thought I was going to snap. He didn't know that the snap had already happened. The Marcus who loved this woman died in that chair 5 minutes ago. The man holding her now was a general planning an ambush. "Let's go home, darling," I said, kissing her forehead. "We should celebrate. We should invite Maya and Kyle over for dinner tonight. I have big news to share." Jasmine's eyes lit up. "That sounds wonderful. Kyle has been dying to hear about the ultrasound. I bet he has," I thought. As we walked out of the clinic to the parking lot, I held her hand. I opened the door of the Porsche I bought her. I watched her slide into the leather seat. My mind was not on the baby. My mind was running a spreadsheet. $50,000 for the wedding, $300,000 for Kyle's debts, $2 million for the house I let them live in rent-free, $500 for the dinner we were about to eat. They thought they were playing me. They thought I was a senile old ATM machine. I started the car. The engine roared to life. They forgot one thing. I built this city on steel and concrete. And when a foundation is rotten, you don't patch it up. You bring in the wrecking ball. Tonight, dinner would be served, and the main course would be the truth. But first, I had a phone call to make. Not to a lawyer. Not yet. I needed to call the one person who could dig up dirt faster than an excavator. I needed a private investigator. Because if I was going to destroy them, I needed it to be total. As I drove, Jasmine chattered on about nursery colors. Blue or green, maybe a soft yellow. I just smiled. I was thinking about a different color. The color of an orange jumpsuit. Wait until you hear what I found on the hidden camera I installed in my own study 3 hours later. You will not believe the audacity of these people. The drive back to my estate was a blur of asphalt and white noise. Jasmine sat in the passenger seat of the Porsche Cayenne I had bought her last month, scrolling through her phone and humming a tune. She was looking at nursery designs on Pinterest. "Look at this one, Marcus," she said, tilting the screen toward me. "It is a safari theme, lions and elephants. It costs $12,000 for the custom mural, but our son deserves the best, right?" I gripped the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Our son. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind was not on driving. My mind was doing what it had done for 50 years in the construction business. It was auditing the books. I looked at Jasmine's profile, that perfect straight nose. 2 years ago, she came to me crying, saying she had a deviated septum, that she couldn't breathe at night. I sent her to the best plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills. $50,000. I wrote the check without blinking because I loved her. Now looking at her, I realized that nose wasn't fixed for her health. It was fixed to make her more marketable, to make her more attractive. But for who I thought about the jewelry. The Cartier bracelet she was wearing right now catching the afternoon sun. $15,000. I thought about the weekly spa treatments, the personal trainer, the wardrobe that cost more than most families earn in a year. I had been building a trophy wife brick by expensive brick. And then my mind drifted to Kyle, my son-in-law, the man married to my daughter, Maya. 3 months ago, Kyle had come to my office. He was sweating, shaking like a leaf. He told me he had made a bad investment. He said he was in debt to some dangerous people. He said they were going to hurt Maya if he didn't pay up. I asked him how much. He said $300,000. I remember the look in his eyes. It was fear, yes. But now replaying the memory, I saw something else. It was calculation. He knew I would never let anything happen to my daughter. I wired the money to an offshore account he provided. I told him to never gamble again. He hugged me weeping, calling me his savior. He called me dad. $300,000. That wasn't a debt. That was a down payment on his betrayal. We pulled up to the iron gates of my estate. The house stood on a hill, a sprawling modern mansion that was supposed to be my legacy. Now it looked like a mausoleum. As the gates swung open, I saw Kyle's car in the driveway. It was a brand new Mercedes. I frowned. He told Maya business was slow. He told me he was struggling to keep the lights on. So where did the Mercedes come from? I parked the Porsche. Before I could turn off the engine, the front door swung open. Kyle walked out holding a glass of my best scotch in his hand. My daughter Maya was behind him, looking tired and worn out, wearing a dress from Target while her husband wore an Armani suit. Kyle strode toward the car with that confident bouncing walk of his. The walk of a man who has never worked a day of hard labor in his life. "Welcome back, Papa Bear," Kyle shouted, raising his glass. He opened Jasmine's door for her, offering her a hand with a little too much familiarity. Look at the glowing mother-to-be. Jasmine took his hand and stepped out. For a split second, their eyes met. It was fast. If you weren't looking for it, you would miss it. But I was looking. It was a look of shared secrets, a look of intimacy that made my stomach turn. So Kyle turned to me, grinning. His teeth were blindingly white. "How is the little champion the doctor give you the thumbs up?" "You are one virile old man, Marcus. I have to hand it to you. Most guys your age are worrying about their prostate, and you are out here starting a new bloodline." He clapped me on the shoulder. I felt a surge of revulsion so strong I almost hit him. His hand felt like a slimy weight. "The baby is fine," I said, my voice low. "Strong heartbeat." "That is what I like to hear." Kyle laughed. "We need more Thorn men in the world. Somebody has to take over the empire when you finally decide to kick your boots off, right?" He wasn't talking about retirement. He was talking about my death. Maya stepped forward and kissed my cheek. "Hi, Dad. I am so glad everything is okay. We were worried when the appointment took so long." Maya looked exhausted. She had bags under her eyes. She was 40 years old, a school teacher who worked 60 hours a week. She loved Kyle blindly. She worshipped the ground he walked on. She didn't know she was sleeping next to a monster. "Let's go inside," Jasmine chirped, linking her arm through mine. "I am starving, and we have to celebrate." We moved into the dining room. The table was set with the fine china, the stuff we only used for Thanksgiving. A roast was sitting in the center. I sat at the head of the table, my usual spot, the seat of power, or so I thought. Kyle sat to my right. Jasmine sat to my left. Maya sat opposite me. As we ate, Kyle dominated the conversation. He talked about a new real estate deal he was working on, a multi-million-dollar complex downtown. He used big words trying to sound smart, but I knew the market. I knew he was talking nonsense. He was a small-time broker with big-time delusions. "You know," Marcus, Kyle said, slicing into his beef. I was thinking, "Once the baby comes, you're going to be tired. Sleepless nights and all that. Maybe it is time you let me handle some of the more stressful assets. I could manage the commercial properties for you. Take the load off." I cut my meat slowly. The knife scraped against the porcelain plate. It was a sharp, screeching sound that made everyone pause. "You think you are ready for that responsibility, Kyle?" I asked, not looking up. Kyle chuckled nervously. "I am family, Marcus. Who can you trust if not family? Plus, with the new baby, expenses are going to go up. You need young blood running the show to maximize profits." I looked up then. I looked him dead in the eye. "Maximize profits," I repeated. "Like you maximized the $300,000 I gave you for your debt." The table went silent. Maya dropped her fork. Jasmine stiffened in her chair. Kyle's smile faltered for a second, but he recovered quickly. "Oh, that was a one-time thing, Marcus. A lesson learned. I am a new man now." I turned to Jasmine. "What do you think, honey? Should we give Kyle the keys to the kingdom?" Jasmine smiled, but her eyes were darting nervously between me and Kyle. "Well, he is very ambitious, Marcus, and he cares about us. Maybe you should think about it. You deserve to relax." Relax. Die. That is what she meant. I took a sip of water. I needed to see it again. I needed to be sure. "Oops," I said. I dropped my napkin. I bent down to pick it up. The tablecloth was long, covering our legs. Under the table, the world was different. I saw Maya's feet tucked politely under her chair in sensible flats. And then I saw the other side. I saw Kyle's expensive Italian loafer. It wasn't under his own chair. It was extended across the gap. His foot was rubbing slowly, rhythmically against Jasmine's calf. Her leg was not pulling away. Instead, she had slipped her foot out of her heel and was resting her toes on top of his shoe. It was a dance. A secret erotic dance happening right under my nose, right under my $5,000 mahogany table. My heart slammed against my ribs. The disrespect was physical. It was nauseating. Here I was, feeding them, clothing them, housing them, and they were playing footsie while plotting to steal my life. I grabbed the napkin and sat up. My face must have been red because Maya asked, "Dad, are you okay? You look flushed." "I am fine, sweetheart," I said. "Just a little indigestion. Something I ate isn't agreeing with me." I looked at Kyle. He was smirking at Jasmine. I looked at Jasmine. She was biting her lip, suppressing a smile. They thought they were so clever. They thought the old man was blind. I stood up abruptly. "Where are you going?" Jasmine asked. "We haven't had dessert." "I lost my appetite," I said. "I have some work to do in the study, a lot of paperwork to go through." "Work tonight?" Kyle asked. "Come on, Marcus. Celebrate with us." I walked to the door and stopped. I turned back to look at them. The happy family. The parasites. I have to review my will, I said. The room went deadly silent. Kyle's fork hovered halfway to his mouth. Jasmine froze. Your will? Jasmine asked, her voice trembling slightly. Why is something wrong? No, I said. I just realized that life is unpredictable. You never know what tomorrow brings. I want to make sure everyone gets exactly what they deserve. I let the words hang in the air. Exactly what they deserve. I walked out of the dining room. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. They were probably terrified. Good. Fear makes people make mistakes, and I was counting on them making a mistake tonight. I walked straight to my study. I locked the door. I didn't go to my desk. I went to the bookshelf. I pulled out a copy of The Art of War. Behind it was a small safe. I spun the dial. Inside was a burner phone and a contact card I hadn't used in 20 years. I dialed the number. It rang twice. Hello? A gruff voice answered. Vince, I said. It is Marcus Thorne. Marcus. The voice sounded surprised. I haven't heard from you since the Union strikes of '98. Are you in trouble? Not me, I said. But I have a pest problem in my house. I need eyes, Vince. I need ears. I need you to come over tonight. Bring the small cameras, the ones you can't see with the naked eye. There was a pause. Who are we watching, Marcus? I looked at the family portrait on my desk. Me, Jasmine, Maya, and Kyle. Everyone smiling. Everyone lying. Everyone I said. I hung up. I sat back in my leather chair and waited. Upstairs, I could hear Kyle and Jasmine laughing. They were probably toasting to their victory. They probably thought the mention of the will meant I was dying. They probably thought they had won. Enjoy the champagne, I whispered to the empty room. Because tomorrow you drink poison. But I didn't know that the poison was already in the house. And I didn't know that what I would find on those cameras would be worse than just an affair. It would be a conspiracy that went deeper than money. It went straight to the grave. If you think you know what betrayal feels like, you have no idea. Wait until I tell you what my daughter Maya said to me later that night when she knocked on my door with tears in her eyes and asked for another $20,000. That was the moment I realized the rot had spread to the only thing I had left to love. The heavy oak door of my study clicked shut, but the silence I craved did not last long. A timid knock interrupted my thoughts. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound of my daughter Maya. Come in, I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. Maya slipped inside, closing the door softly behind her. She looked small. At 40 years old, she should have been in the prime of her life. She was a school teacher, a woman who shaped young minds. Yet in this house, she walked like a ghost. She was wearing a faded cardigan that I recognized from 5 years ago. It had a small hole near the cuff. I sat behind my mahogany desk, the desk where I had signed contracts worth millions, and looked at my only child. I wanted to see strength. I wanted to see the fire of her mother. Instead, I saw a woman defeated by her own marriage. Daddy, do you have a minute? She asked, fidgeting with her wedding ring. It was a modest band. Kyle had promised to upgrade it for their 10th anniversary last year. He never did. Instead, he bought himself a new set of golf clubs for $3,000. I knew because I saw the charge on the credit card statement I paid. Sit down, Maya, I said, gesturing to the leather chair opposite me. What is on your mind? She sat on the edge of the seat, her hands clasping and unclasping in her lap. She looked terrified. I wanted to talk to you about Kyle, she stammered. I leaned back, steepled my fingers, and waited. I knew what was coming. It was always the same song, just a different verse. He has this incredible opportunity, Dad. She began, her words rushing out like water from a burst pipe. It is a tech startup. His friend from college is launching it. They need seed money. Just a bridge loan until the venture capital comes in next month. Kyle says it is a guaranteed return. Triple the investment in 6 months. I stared at her. I looked at the dark circles under her eyes. How much, I asked. Maya bit her lip. $20,000. $20,000. It was not a fortune to me. I had spent more than that on the landscaping for the front yard. But it was the principle. It was the pattern. And what happened to the real estate project last month, I asked. The one I gave him $10,000 for. Oh, that. The market shifted, Maya said quickly, reciting the lies her husband had fed her. It is on hold. But this tech thing. Dad, it is different. Kyle is really excited. He has been working so hard. Working hard. I raised an eyebrow. Maya. He was at the country club 3 times last week. I saw the check-ins on social media. He is networking. She defended him, but her voice lacked conviction. He meets investors there. He is out constantly. Every Tuesday night, he is gone until midnight meeting with partners. He comes home so tired, Dad. He is doing this for us, for our future. I froze. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tuesday night. My mind flashed back to the conversation I had with Jasmine just 2 days ago. I was complaining that we never had dinner together on Tuesdays. "Oh, Marcus, you know Tuesday is my intense Bikram yoga class," she had said, stretching her arms over her head, showing off her toned figure. "I go to the studio across town. It helps me stay young for you." Tuesday night, my wife was at yoga, my son-in-law was at business meetings, both of them gone until midnight. Both of them returning with flushed skin and messy hair smelling of showers taken at the gym. I felt a physical blow to my chest. It wasn't a heart attack. It was the sledgehammer of truth. I looked at Maya. She was still talking, still explaining the imaginary merits of Kyle's imaginary business. She didn't know. She truly didn't know. She was sitting there begging her father for money to give to her husband so he could likely spend it on dinner dates with her father's wife. The sickness rose in my throat. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. But I was Marcus Thorne. I didn't scream. I calculated. "Dad." Maya asked, sensing my silence. "Will you help him?" "Please." He said if he doesn't get the buy-in by tomorrow, he misses the window. He is really stressed about it. I looked at my daughter. I loved her. But in that moment, I realized my money had crippled her. I had always been the safety net. I had always fixed the problems. And because I always fixed them, she never learned to fight. She never learned to see the wolves because I had built a wall around her. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. Simple. Final. Maya blinked as if I had spoken a foreign language. "What?" "No," I repeated, my voice harder. "I am not giving Kyle $20,000. I am not giving him 20 cents. "But Dad," she started to panic. Her eyes widened. "You don't understand. He needs this. He promised me this would be the big break." "Kyle has had 10 big breaks, Maya," I said, leaning forward. "He is 38 years old. He drives a Mercedes I paid for. He lives in a house I own. He wears suits I bought. If he wants to invest in a tech startup, tell him to get a job. Tell him to work a double shift. Tell him to sell his golf clubs." Maya's face crumbled. She looked like a child who had been slapped. "Dad, please. He will be so angry. He gets in these moods when things don't go his way." "Let him get angry," I said. "Maybe anger will motivate him to become a man." Suddenly the door to my study flew open. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a shove. Kyle stood there. He had been listening. Of course he had. He was a coward who sent his wife to do his begging while he lurked in the hallway. His face was red. The charming smile was gone. His eyes were bulging. "You selfish old man," Kyle shouted, stepping into the room. "Kyle," Maya gasped, jumping up. "Please stop." "Shut up," Maya. Kyle snapped at her, not even looking at her. "You couldn't even sell it right. You are pathetic. I told you to emphasize the return on investment. You were whining like a beggar." He turned his rage on me. "You think you are better than me because you have money. You are just a lucky old bricklayer. I am trying to build an empire here, and you are hoarding cash like a dragon. You can't take it with you when you die, Marcus. And looking at you, that is going to be sooner rather than later." I didn't stand up. I didn't need to. I just watched him. I watched the way he loomed over my daughter. I watched Maya shrink away from him. She didn't fight back. She didn't defend me. She just looked down at the floor and whispered, "I am sorry, Kyle." I tried. That apology broke my heart more than his insults. Kyle kicked the heavy leather armchair next to the door. It made a loud thud. Maya flinched. "Useless," Kyle spat, glaring at Maya. "You are absolutely useless. Your father is a miser and you are a doormat. I don't know why I bother with either of you." He looked at me one last time, his eyes full of hate. "Keep your money, old man. I will find it somewhere else. I always do. But don't expect me to visit you in the nursing home when your trophy wife finally dumps you." He stormed out, leaving the door wide open. Maya stood there trembling. Tears were streaming down her face. I waited for her to get angry. I waited for her to say, "That is it. I am leaving him." Instead, she wiped her eyes and looked at me with a pleading expression. "Why did you have to provoke him?" "Dad," she whispered, "you know how sensitive he is about his career. Now I have to go deal with him all night." She turned and ran after him. Kyle wait terrified that she might lose the man who treated her like garbage. I sat alone in my study. The silence returned, but it was heavy now, toxic. I swiveled my chair around to look out the window. The sun was setting over my estate. The shadows were lengthening across the lawn. I realized then that I had made a terrible mistake. I had spent 40 years building a fortune to protect my family, but I had failed to protect them from themselves. I was feeding two snakes. One was sleeping in my bed, plotting to steal my legacy with a baby that wasn't mine. The other was sleeping in my guest house, abusing my daughter and spending my money on my wife. And my daughter. She wasn't a snake. She was the mouse they were both playing with. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I pulled out a bottle of whiskey and a single glass. I poured a shot. My hand was steady. The time for generosity was over. The time for being the benevolent patriarch was over. Kyle wanted money. I would give him a financial lesson he would never forget. Jasmine wanted a life of luxury. I would show her exactly what the street looked like. I took a sip of the whiskey. It burned hot and clean. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the private investigator again. "Vince," I said when he answered. "Change of plans. I don't just want you to watch them. I want you to dig into Kyle's finances. I want to know every debt, every loan, every shadowy deal he has ever made." And Vince, yeah, Marcus, check the hotel registries for every Tuesday night for the last 2 years. Cross-reference them with Jasmine's credit card and Kyle's location data. "You think," Vince started, but stopped. "I don't think, Vince." "I know. Just get me the proof. I want the photos. I want the receipts. I want it all in 4K resolution." I hung up. I looked at the empty doorway where my daughter had stood. "I am sorry, Maya," I whispered. "This is going to hurt you. It is going to break your heart. But sometimes you have to break a bone to reset it properly." I turned back to my computer. The screen glowed in the dim light. I opened my online banking portal. Account balance $15,420,000. I clicked on the transfer tab. It was time to start moving the pieces. It was time to start draining the swamp. Kyle thought I was a lucky bricklayer. He was about to find out that bricklayers know exactly how to bury things so they are never found again. But first, I had to play the part. I had to be the clueless old man for just a little longer. I had to let them think they were winning, because the higher they climbed, the harder they would fall. And I was going to make sure the ground they hit was made of solid concrete. As I sat there planning my war, I didn't know that the next day the universe would hand me a weapon I hadn't even asked for. A simple diamond necklace that would become the noose around their necks. Let me tell you about the missing $50,000 necklace. The silence of my house at 3 a.m. was usually my favorite sound. It was the sound of peace, the sound of a kingdom at rest. But tonight the silence felt heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. I sat in my private den, the one room in the house where only I had the key, waiting for Vince. Vince was not just a private investigator. We had served in the same platoon in Vietnam 50 years ago. He was a man made of granite and bad memories, the kind of person who could disappear in a crowded room and reappear behind you with a knife. When I called him, he didn't ask questions. He just asked for the address. He arrived through the back garden entrance dressed in black, carrying a small metal case. He looked at me, and his eyes, usually cold and detached, softened just a fraction. He saw the pain etched into my face. He saw the betrayal. "You look like hell, Marcus." Vince grunted, setting the case on my desk. "I feel like I am standing in wet concrete that is setting fast," I replied, pouring him a glass of water. "I need to know what is happening in my own home, Vince. I need eyes in the walls." Vince nodded. He opened the case. Inside lay a collection of devices that looked more like science fiction than surveillance equipment. Tiny lenses no bigger than a pinhead. Microphones that could pick up a whisper from 3 rooms away. "Where do they meet?" Vince asked. "My home office," I said, the words tasting like bile. "Kyle calls it his war room. He says he needs the space to spread out his blueprints for these imaginary projects of his. Jasmine brings him coffee, and then the door stays locked for hours. Vince didn't say a word. He just picked up a device that looked exactly like a smoke detector. "Let's go," he said. We crept through the silent house. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a strange mix of adrenaline and sorrow. This was the house where I had raised my daughter. This was the house where I thought I would grow old in peace. Now I was creeping through the hallways like a thief, planting bugs to catch the people who were supposed to love me. We entered the office. It smelled of my leather books and Kyle's cheap cologne. Vince worked quickly. He replaced the smoke detector on the ceiling with his modified one. Then he moved to the bookshelf behind my desk. He took a small model of the Sears Tower, a souvenir from one of my biggest concrete contracts, and embedded a tiny camera into the base. "It has a wide angle," Vince whispered. "It will capture the whole room, audio and video. It uploads directly to a secure server. You can watch it on your tablet in real time." We were done in 10 minutes. Vince slipped out the back door as quietly as he had arrived. Before he left, he gripped my shoulder. "Be careful what you look for, Marcus," he warned. "Sometimes the truth cuts deeper than a bullet." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my den staring at the blank screen of my tablet. The next morning, the performance began. Kyle came down for breakfast looking refreshed and arrogant. Jasmine was wearing a silk robe I had bought her in Paris. They kissed me on the cheek. They ate my food. Marcus, Kyle said, wiping crumbs from his mouth. "I have a big strategy meeting today with some overseas investors. Do you mind if I commandeer the office again? I need total privacy. It is a sensitive deal." I sipped my coffee. I forced my hand not to shake. "Of course, Kyle," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a mask of clay. "Go ahead, make us some money." "Thanks, Dad," he said. "You are the best." Jasmine stood up. "I will bring you some snacks later, honey," she said to him. "You work so hard." I watched them walk away. I waited until I heard the heavy click of the office door lock. Then I retreated to my den. I locked the door. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. I picked up the tablet. My hands were trembling as I opened the app. A loading circle spun for a second, and then the image flickered to life. The picture was crystal clear. It was 4K resolution broadcast straight from the model skyscraper on the shelf. I saw my office. I saw my desk. And I saw them. They weren't looking at blueprints. They weren't calling investors. Kyle was sitting in my leather chair, his feet up on my desk, spinning a letter opener between his fingers. Jasmine was sitting on the edge of the desk right next to him. Her robe was loose. They were laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a cruel, mocking sound that chilled me to the bone. I turned up the volume. "I can't believe he bought the tech startup story," Kyle was saying, taking a sip of my 50-year-old scotch directly from the bottle. "The old man is losing his edge. He is getting soft." "He is not just soft, he is pathetic," Jasmine replied, running her hand through Kyle's hair. "Did you see him this morning, trying to act like the big patriarch? It is disgusting. I can barely stand to let him touch me." I closed my eyes. The pain was physical. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut, but I forced myself to look. I had to see it all. "So what is the timeline?" Kyle asked. "We can't keep this charade up forever. I am tired of living in the guest house, Jasmine. I want the master bedroom. I want him gone." Jasmine sighed. She leaned in and kissed him. A long, passionate kiss that she had never given me. "Be patient, baby," she cooed. "We have to wait until the brat is born. Once the baby is here, Marcus will rewrite the will to include his son. He told me he wants to leave everything to the boy." "And once the will is signed?" Kyle asked. Jasmine smiled. It was a smile I had fallen in love with. Now it looked like the grin of a demon. "Dr. Evans says his heart is weak," she said. "He takes those pills every morning. Beta blockers." "Yeah, so, Jasmine whispered, her voice dropping, but the microphone picked it up perfectly. "After the baby is born, maybe his dosage gets mixed up. Or maybe he just gets a little too excited." "What do you mean?" Kyle asked, leaning forward. Jasmine picked up a pen and tapped it against the desk. "I did some reading. There are drugs that simulate a heart attack. Adrenaline spikes. If a man his age with his condition suddenly had a massive surge of adrenaline, poof, nature takes its course. No one questions a 72-year-old man dying in his sleep." I stopped breathing. My blood ran cold, then hot, then cold again. They weren't just planning to steal my money. They were planning to kill me. Kyle laughed, a loud, booming laugh. "You are wicked, Jazz. I love it. So we get the baby, we get the new will, and then we give the old man a little push into the grave." "Exactly," Jasmine said. "And then it is all ours. The house, the accounts, the business. We can kick Maya out to the street and finally live the life we deserve." She stood up and twirled around the room. I am going to turn this office into a shoe closet, she declared, and I am going to burn all his ugly suits in the backyard. I took the headphones off. I sat in the silence of my den. My heart was beating slow and hard. Thump, thump, thump. It was the heart they planned to stop. It was the heart they thought was weak. But they forgot what built that heart. It was built on construction sites in the freezing Chicago winter. It was built in boardrooms where men tried to destroy me and failed. It was built on resilience. I looked at the screen one last time. Kyle was pouring another drink. Jasmine was laughing. They were celebrating my death before I was even dead. I didn't cry. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, hard resolve. I saved the video file. I backed it up to 3 different cloud servers. I sent a copy to Vince. Then I stood up. I walked to the mirror. I looked at the old man staring back at me. "You are not dead yet, Marcus," I whispered to my reflection. "And you are not going to die for them." I needed a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. I needed a shark. I needed someone who could strip the flesh from their bones without them even feeling the bite until it was too late. And I needed to play the role of a lifetime. I had to be the loving husband, the doting father-in-law. I had to smile while they plotted my murder. I unlocked the door to my den. I walked to the kitchen. I made myself a sandwich. When they finally came out of the office 2 hours later looking disheveled and smug, I was sitting in the living room reading a newspaper. "How was the meeting?" I asked, not looking up. "Great," Kyle said. "Really productive. We are going to make a killing, Marcus." I looked up then. I looked right into his eyes. "I bet you are, Kyle," I said. "I bet you are." But they didn't know that the only thing dying in this house was their future. I picked up my phone. I saw a notification. It was from my bank. A transaction alert. Jasmine had just charged $5,000 to a jewelry store. I smiled. Let her buy the jewelry. It would make excellent evidence in the divorce court. But before the divorce, there was one more loose end to tie up. One more betrayal I had to confirm. I remembered the necklace. The diamond necklace Jasmine claimed was stolen last week. She had blamed our housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins had worked for me for 20 years. I had fired her in a rage because I believed my wife. Now I knew better. I dialed Vince's number again. "Vince," I said, "I need you to find a necklace. A diamond pendant. Custom made. Jasmine said it was lost. I have a feeling it wasn't lost. I have a feeling it was sold." "I am on it," Vince said. I hung up. I was going to get Mrs. Higgins back, and I was going to find out exactly where that necklace went. Because in a war, you don't just kill the enemy. You gather their ammunition and use it against them, and I was fully loaded. The scream that tore through my house was shrill enough to shatter glass. It wasn't a scream of physical pain. I know the sound of pain. I heard enough of it in the jungle during the war. This was the sound of theatrical outrage. It was a performance. I was in the kitchen, slowly drinking my morning coffee, trying to wash down the bitter taste of the betrayal I had witnessed on the monitor the night before. When I heard the noise coming from the master bedroom upstairs, I didn't run. A 72-year-old man with a heart condition isn't supposed to run. I walked, measuring my steps, leaning heavily on my cane, playing the part of the frail patriarch they all believed I was. When I reached the top of the stairs, I found a scene that made my blood boil hotter than it had when I discovered the affair. Jasmine was standing in the hallway, her face twisted in ugly cosmetic rage. She was pointing a manicured finger at Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins was 70 years old. She had been my housekeeper for 2 decades. She was the one who made sure I took my medicine when my first wife died. She was the one who ironed my shirts with military precision. She was a woman of dignity and grace, and now she was shrinking against the wall, sobbing into her apron, her small frame trembling like a leaf in a storm. "You thief," Jasmine screeched, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You ungrateful old hag. I know you took it, Jasmine," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "Calm down. What is going on?" Jasmine spun around, her eyes wide with fake tears. She rushed to me, grabbing my arm. "Marcus, it is gone. The diamond pendant you gave me for our first anniversary. The $50,000 one. It is gone." She pointed back at Mrs. Higgins. She was the only one in the room cleaning this morning. I left it on the vanity for 5 minutes while I showered. When I came out, it was gone. I looked at Mrs. Higgins. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Mr. Thorne, please," she whispered. "I would never. You know I would never. I knew. Of course I knew. Mrs. Higgins had found loose cash in my pockets 100 times and always left it on my dresser down to the last penny. She was honest to a fault. But as I looked at Jasmine's face, I realized something terrifying. She needed a scapegoat. She needed to explain why the necklace was gone, because she probably planned to sell it herself, or perhaps she just wanted to hurt someone. Search her bag, Jasmine demanded. Call the police. I want her arrested. I had to make a choice. If I defended Mrs. Higgins now, if I stood up to Jasmine with the full force of my authority, I would blow my cover. They would know the old lion still had teeth. They would realize I was on to them. And if they realized that, they might accelerate their plan to kill me. To win the war, I had to sacrifice a soldier. It was the hardest decision I had made since 1968. Mrs. Higgins, I said, my voice cracking slightly. Did you take the necklace? No, sir. Never, she cried. I looked at Jasmine. She was tapping her foot, waiting for me to be the husband she manipulated. I cannot have thieves in this house, Jasmine said coldly. If you don't fire her, Marcus, I will leave. I don't feel safe. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. Mrs. Higgins, I said softly, go downstairs. Pack your things. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Higgins looked at me as if I had stabbed her. The betrayal in her eyes hurt more than the angina in my chest. Mr. Thorne, she whispered. Just go, I said, turning away so she wouldn't see the shame burning in my eyes. I will send you your final check, Jasmine smirked. It was a small, victorious twitch of her lips. She had won. She had exerted her power and cleared the board of the one person in the house who was loyal to me. As Mrs. Higgins walked down the stairs weeping softly, I felt a piece of my soul chip away. I am sorry, Mrs. Higgins, I thought. I will make this right. I promise. Once the front door closed, Jasmine sighed dramatically. Finally. I never liked her anyway. She smelled like mothballs. I didn't say a word. I went back to my study. I locked the door. I went straight to the server. I had installed cameras in the master bedroom 2 days ago, hidden in the smoke detector, just like in the office. I sat down and rewound the footage to 9 a.m. I watched Jasmine leave the room to take a shower. The necklace was indeed sitting on the vanity, glittering in the sunlight. 2 minutes later, the door opened. It wasn't Mrs. Higgins. It was Kyle. He slipped into the room, moving quickly, nervously. He looked toward the bathroom door, where the water was running. Then he walked to the vanity. He didn't hesitate. He picked up the necklace. He shoved it into his pocket. But then he did something that made me freeze. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. Hey, baby, he whispered. The microphone picked it up clearly. Yeah, I got it. It is a big rock. $50K easy. No, Jasmine has no idea. Listen, meet me at the usual spot. No, not you. I have to cash it out first. I can't give you a stolen necklace. Are you crazy? I will bring you the cash. We can book that trip to Cabo. Yeah. I love you too, Lola. He hung up. He checked his reflection in the mirror, winked at himself, and slipped out of the room. I sat back in my chair. A twist within a twist. Kyle wasn't just stealing from me, he was stealing from Jasmine. He was betraying his wife, my daughter, with Jasmine. And now he was betraying his mistress, my wife, with a third woman named Lola. He was a parasite feeding on a parasite. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Jasmine was upstairs right now, thinking she had successfully framed the housekeeper, probably assuming she had simply misplaced the necklace or that Mrs. Higgins actually took it. She didn't know her partner in crime, the father of her baby, was robbing her blind to fund another affair. I checked the time. It was noon. Kyle had left the house an hour ago. I called Vince. Vince, I said. Kyle left the house at 11. Track his phone. Where did he go? Give me a minute, Marcus. I waited, listening to the ticking of the grandfather clock. He made 2 stops, Vince said. First a coffee shop on 4th Street, then a pawn shop, Goldman's Pawn and Loan on Cicero Avenue. He is still there. Goldman's. I knew the place. It was a fence for desperate people. I am going out, I told Vince. I grabbed my coat and my cane. I walked out to the garage. I didn't take the Rolls Royce. I took my old pickup truck, the one I kept for hauling lumber. It was nondescript. I drove to Cicero Avenue. The neighborhood was rough, filled with payday loan stores and liquor shops. This was where Kyle, the man who pretended to be a high-flying investor, did his banking. I parked across the street and waited. 5 minutes later, Kyle walked out of the shop. He was counting a thick stack of cash. He looked ecstatic. He got into his Mercedes and sped off. I waited until he was gone, then I crossed the street. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. The shop smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. The pawnbroker was a heavy-set man behind bulletproof glass. "Can I help you, Pops?" he asked, barely looking up from his magazine. "I need to see the necklace you just bought," I said. The man looked up. "I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't buy no necklace." I pulled out a wad of $100 bills. I placed $2,000 on the counter. "This is for your memory," I said. The man eyed the money. He licked his lips. A guy just came in. Flashy type. Sold a diamond pendant. Said it belonged to his grandmother. "Let me see it." He reached under the counter and pulled out a plastic bag. Inside was the necklace. My anniversary gift. The symbol of my love now reduced to a commodity in a dirty bag. "How much did you give him for it?" I asked. $5,000, the man laughed. He was in a hurry. Didn't even haggle. Idiot didn't know it is worth 10 times that. I put another $5,000 on the counter, plus the $2,000 bribe. "I am buying it back," I said. "And I want the pawn ticket. The one with his signature on it." The man hesitated. "That is against policy." I put another $1,000 down. He slid the ticket and the necklace under the glass. "Pleasure doing business with you, Pops." I walked out of the shop with the necklace in my pocket and the pawn ticket in my wallet. That ticket was more valuable than the diamond. It was physical proof. It had Kyle's name, his driver's license number, and his signature confirming he sold a stolen item. I drove to a small diner on the outskirts of town. I called Mrs. Higgins. She answered on the first ring, crying, "Mr. Thorne." "Meet me at the diner on Elm Street," I said. "And stop crying, Martha. You are not fired." When she arrived, I explained everything. Well, not everything. I didn't tell her about the murder plot. I just told her I was conducting an investigation and I needed her to play along. I gave her a check for $10,000. Take a vacation. "Martha," I said, "go see your grandkids in Florida. Stay there until I call you. When you come back, you will have your job back and a raise. But for now, everyone needs to think you are gone." She hugged me, weeping. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I was so scared." I drove home as the sun was setting. When I walked into the living room, the atmosphere was tense. Jasmine was lying on the sofa with a cold compress on her head. Kyle was sitting next to her, holding her hand, looking the picture of a concerned friend. "Did you find it?" Jasmine asked weakly. "Did the police catch that old witch?" I sat down in my armchair. I tapped my cane on the floor. "No," I said. "The police couldn't find her. She seems to have vanished." Kyle shook his head. "It is a shame, Marcus. You treat people like family, and they stab you in the back. It just goes to show you can't trust anyone these days." He squeezed Jasmine's hand. "Don't worry, Jazz. We will get you a new necklace. Better than that one." I watched him. I watched the man who had sold my wife's jewelry to fund a trip with his mistress, sitting there comforting the woman he robbed. "You are right, Kyle," I said, reaching into my pocket and fingering the cold metal of the necklace. "Trust is a dangerous thing, and when you lose it, you never get it back." I smiled at them. It was a genuine smile, because for the first time, I wasn't just the victim. I was the hunter, and I had just baited the trap. "Dinner is ready," Maya called from the kitchen. We stood up to eat. Kyle offered me his arm. "Let me help you, Dad. You look tired." "I am not tired, Kyle," I said, brushing him off. "I am just waking up." As I cut into my steak, I looked at Jasmine's bare neck. "I have a surprise for you, Jasmine," I said. "Since you are so distraught about the necklace, I decided to update my will tomorrow. I want to make sure my assets are liquid, so that you and the baby are taken care of immediately without having to sell property." Jasmine and Kyle exchanged a look. It was the look of sharks smelling blood in the water. "Really, Marcus?" Jasmine asked, her voice trembling with excitement. "That is so generous." "Yes," I said. "I am meeting the lawyer in the morning. They thought I was handing them the keys to the vault. They didn't know I was actually handing them the shovel to dig their own graves." But before the lawyer, there was the birthday party. My 73rd birthday was in 2 days, and Kyle had insisted on organizing it. He said it would be a night to remember. He was right. It would be a night no one would ever forget, especially him, because I had a special gift planned for the speech he was preparing to give. The office of my attorney, Harrison, smelled of old leather and expensive decisions. It was a smell I usually loved, the scent of deals being closed and fortunes being made. But today, it smelled like a battlefield. Harrison sat across from me, his silver eyebrows knitted together in confusion. He held the draft of my new will in his trembling hands. He read it once, Then he read it again. Then he took off his glasses and looked at me as if I had suddenly grown a second head. "Marcus," he said slowly, choosing his words with the care of a man walking through a minefield. "Do you understand what you are asking me to do? This is aggressive. It is practically a declaration of war from beyond the grave." I leaned back in the high-back chair, resting my hands on my cane. I didn't feel like a man writing a will. I felt like a general drawing a map for an ambush. "I understand perfectly, Harrison," I said. "I want it exactly as I dictated. Read it back to me." Harrison sighed. He put his glasses back on. "Clause 4, Section B," he read. "The entirety of the estate, including the construction firm, the liquid assets, and the real estate holdings, shall be placed into the Baby Thorne Trust. The beneficiary of this trust is the unborn child currently carried by Jasmine Thorne. However—" He paused, looking up at me nervously. "Go on," I said. "Read the condition." "However," Harrison continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "the funds shall only be released upon the completion of a court-supervised DNA test confirming with 99.9% accuracy that the child is the biological issue of Marcus Thorne. If the DNA does not match, the entire estate shall be liquidated immediately and the proceeds donated to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Jasmine Thorne and Kyle," he hesitated on the name, "Kyle, my son-in-law, are explicitly excluded from receiving any personal stipends in the event of a negative match." Harrison put the paper down. "Marcus, if you do this, if the baby isn't yours, you are leaving your wife and your daughter's family destitute. They will be on the street." I looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. I had built 3 of those towers. I knew what it took to build a foundation, and I knew what happened when you built on sand. "If the baby is mine, they live like royalty," I said calmly. "If the baby is not mine, then they are not my family. And I don't support strangers, Harrison, especially strangers who try to steal from me." Harrison nodded slowly. He didn't know about the affair. He didn't know about the murder plot. He just saw a hard old man making a hard decision. He stamped the document. It was done. The trap was set. I left the office feeling lighter than I had in days. The Baby Thorne Trust was a time bomb. They were waiting for me to die so they could cash in. Instead, my death would be the trigger that blew up their entire world. But the day wasn't over. The enemy was still hungry. When I pulled into the driveway of my estate, Jasmine was waiting for me on the porch. She was wearing a flowing white dress that made her look like an angel, a very expensive, very dangerous angel. She was pacing back and forth, checking her watch. As soon as I stepped out of the truck, she rushed over to me. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't ask about the lawyer. She went straight for the jugular. "Marcus," she cried, throwing her arms around my neck. "I have been so worried. I have been thinking all day about our future, about the baby." I stiffened. I let her hug me, but I didn't hug back. "What about the baby, Jasmine?" I asked. She pulled back, her eyes wide and wet with fake tears. "I had a nightmare, Marcus. I dreamt that something happened to you before the baby was born, and we were left with nothing. I know you have money, but probate takes so long. I am scared, Marcus. I need security, not for me, but for our son." I watched her performance. It was good, Oscar-worthy. "What do you want, Jasmine?" I asked. "I want the Florida house," she said quickly. "The vacation villa in Miami, the one on the beach." I raised an eyebrow. The Florida house was my sanctuary. It was worth $5 million. It was where I planned to retire before she came along. "You want the villa?" I asked. "Put it in my name, Marcus," she pleaded, gripping my lapels. "Just the villa, as a gift. A push present. That is what they call it. It would make me feel so safe. If anything happens, at least the baby and I have a roof over our heads." I looked at her. I saw the greed dancing behind her eyes. She didn't want safety. She wanted an asset she could flip for cash the moment I was in the ground, or maybe even before. I knew that if I said no, she would get suspicious. She would wonder why the generous old man was suddenly tightening the purse strings. She might tip off Kyle. They might rush their plan to kill me. I had to say yes, but I had to say yes in a way that meant no. I smiled, a tired, loving smile. "You are right, Jasmine," I said, patting her hand. "You shouldn't have to worry. Stress is bad for the baby. If the Florida house makes you feel safe, it is yours." Her face lit up like a neon sign. Really? You mean it? I mean it, I said. Go inside, call your notary, get the deed ready. I will sign it tonight. She squealed and kissed me on the cheek. Oh, Marcus, you are the best husband in the world. She ran inside to call Kyle. I stayed by the truck for a moment, listening to the gravel crunch under my boots. I reached into my inner pocket. I pulled out a pen. It wasn't a Mont Blanc, it wasn't a Cartier. It was a heavy black fountain pen that Vince had given me yesterday along with the surveillance equipment. This is a spy pen, Marcus Vince had said. The CIA used stuff like this in the 70s. The ink is chemically unstable. It looks like normal black ink when it hits the paper. But when it reacts with the carbon in the air, it begins to break down. In 24 hours, it fades to gray. In 48 hours, it is invisible. The paper will be blank. I looked at the pen. It was my magic wand. I walked into the house. The atmosphere was celebratory. Kyle was there, of course. He had miraculously finished his meetings early. He was popping a bottle of champagne. To Marcus, Kyle toasted, raising his glass. The most generous man I know. To Marcus, Jasmine echoed, beaming. I sat down at the dining table. In front of me was the deed to the Miami villa. Jasmine had printed it out on thick official bond paper. The notary, a nervous young woman Jasmine had hired, was waiting with her stamp. This is a big gift, Marcus Kyle said, leaning over my shoulder. $5 million. You are really setting her up for life. I looked at the deed. It transferred 100% ownership from Marcus Thorne to Jasmine Thorne. Irrevocable. Immediate. It was a robbery in plain sight. I uncapped the black pen. I looked at Jasmine. She was practically vibrating with anticipation. She was already mentally decorating the living room in Miami. She was already spending the money. I love you, Jasmine, I said. I love you too, Marcus, she said. Now sign. Please. I put the nib of the pen to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly. Black, permanent looking. I signed my name, Marcus Thorne. The signature was bold, strong. The notary stamped it. Jasmine grabbed the paper before the ink was even dry. She hugged it to her chest. It is done, she laughed. It is finally done. Kyle clapped me on the back. You did a good thing, Dad. A really good thing. I capped the pen and put it back in my pocket. Yes, I said. I think I did. I watched them celebrate. They were drinking my champagne in my house, holding a piece of paper that they thought was a winning lottery ticket. They didn't know that in 48 hours, that piece of paper would be nothing but a blank sheet of stationery. They didn't know that when Jasmine went to file the deed at the county clerk's office next week, the clerk would look at her like she was crazy and ask why she was trying to file a document with no signature. And by then, it would be too late. I stood up. I am going to bed, I said. All this excitement has worn me out. Go rest, Marcus, Jasmine said, not even looking at me. She was too busy taking a photo of the deed to send to her friends. I walked up the stairs. My heart was heavy, but my conscience was clear. I had given them exactly what they asked for. Nothing. As I lay in bed that night listening to them clinking glasses downstairs, I thought about the new will in Harrison's safe. And I thought about the disappearing ink on the table downstairs. The pieces were moving, the trap was closing, but there was one more thing I needed to do. I needed to destroy Kyle's reputation before I destroyed his bank account. I needed to humiliate him in front of the very people he tried to impress, and the perfect opportunity was coming up. The gender reveal party. Jasmine wanted a spectacle, I would give her a spectacle. I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, dreaming of blank pages and fresh starts. The lion was not sleeping tonight. The lion was waiting. My 73rd birthday party was a masterclass in deception. If you looked at it from the outside, it was perfect. The great hall of my estate was filled with fresh lilies that cost more than my first car. A jazz quartet was playing soft, inoffensive tunes in the corner. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of caviar and champagne. But the smell in the air wasn't expensive perfume or gourmet food. To me, it smelled like rot. It smelled like a funeral disguised as a festival. Jasmine had organized everything. She claimed it was to honor me, but I knew better. This wasn't a party for Marcus Thorne. This was a networking event for Kyle. The guest list was 70% his associates, young, hungry men in shiny suits who looked at my mahogany walls and calculated how much they would fetch at an auction. The other 30% were Jasmine's friends' women who looked at me with pity because they thought I was a senile old man about to be fleeced. I sat in my favorite armchair positioned like a throne at the head of the room. I held a glass of sparkling water watching the sharks circle. "Happy birthday," Marcus people said as they walked by. They didn't mean it. They were smiling at the checkbook, not the man. Then came the main event. Kyle clapped his hands loudly, silencing the band. "Attention, everyone," he shouted, his voice booming with the confidence of a man who thinks he has already won the lottery. "I want to make a special toast to the man of the hour, the legend, my father-in-law, Marcus Thorne." The room applauded politely. Maya stood in the back looking uncomfortable in a dress that was 2 seasons old. She tried to catch my eye, giving me a weak, apologetic smile. I winked at her, trying to tell her it was okay. But it wasn't okay. Kyle walked over to me holding a wooden box. He made a show of presenting it with 2 hands, bowing slightly like a feudal lord mocking a peasant king. "Marcus," he said, his voice dripping with synthetic syrup, "I know you appreciate the finer things in life. A man of your stature deserves only the best. I had these flown in specifically for tonight. Genuine Cohiba Bihike cigars, directly from Havana." A murmur of appreciation went through the crowd. Those cigars were legendary. They cost hundreds of dollars each. I took the box. It was heavy, was polished. I opened the lid. The smell hit me instantly. I have smoked cigars for 50 years. I smoked them when I laid the foundation of the Sears Tower. I smoked them when I signed my first $1 million contract. I know the smell of Cuban tobacco. It is rich, earthy, with a hint of spice. This smelled like damp cardboard and chemicals. I picked one up. The band looked perfect. The wrapper was dark and oily. But when I rolled it between my fingers, I felt the soft spots. I felt the uneven filling. These weren't Cohibas. These were counterfeits. Probably bought from a guy out of a trunk in Miami for $20 a box. Kyle was grinning at me, expecting me to be overwhelmed by his generosity. He thought I was a stupid old man who couldn't tell the difference between a diamond and a piece of glass. "Thank you, Kyle," I said, keeping my face neutral. "This is truly unexpected." "Only the best for you, Dad," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. He turned back to his friends, grabbing a glass of scotch. He was already drunk. I could see the flush on his neck. The alcohol was loosening his tongue, and the arrogance he usually kept hidden behind a veneer of politeness was starting to leak out. I put the box down and watched him. He was holding court with 3 other men. They were all white, all wealthy, all looking around my house with expressions of appraisal. I leaned in, slightly straining to hear over the jazz music. "It is a nice place," one of the men said to Kyle. "A bit dated, though. Lot of heavy wood." Kyle laughed. "Yeah, well, you know how the older generation is. They like their caves. But don't worry. Once the transition happens, we are going to gut the place. Open concept, modern art. We are going to bring some real class to this estate." I gripped my cane. Transition. He meant my death. But he wasn't done. He took a long swig of scotch and leaned in closer to his friends. "You know," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, but loud enough for me to hear with my hearing aid turned up. "It is funny. Marcus built all this, sure. He worked hard. You have to give credit to these people for their physical stamina, but at the end of the day, you need a certain intellect to manage wealth. You need the right breeding." My blood stopped moving in my veins. These people. Breeding. He was standing in the house of a black man drinking a black man's liquor, married to a black woman, sleeping with another black woman, and he was talking about us like we were livestock. Like we were strong mules, good for plowing the field, but not smart enough to own the farm. One of his friends looked uncomfortable and glanced at me. Kyle didn't even check. He was too lost in his own superiority. "That is why I am stepping in," Kyle continued, swirling his drink. "The Thorne line needs an upgrade. It needs some management. Once my son is born, we are going to have the best of both worlds, the money from him and the brains from me. It is evolution, gentlemen, just evolution." He laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. I looked at Jasmine across the room. She was chatting with her friends, oblivious. She didn't hear her lover calling her race inferior. She didn't hear him erasing her identity. She only saw the suit and the smile. The rage inside me was a cold fire. It wasn't the explosive anger of youth. It was the absolute zero of a judge passing a death sentence. I slowly stood up. The room quieted down. People turned to look. They expected a thank you speech. They expected the old man to mumble some gratitude for the fake cigars. I tapped my glass with a spoon. Ding, ding, ding. Kyle turned around, smiling that oily smile. "Speech, speech for the birthday boy," he shouted. I looked at him. I didn't smile back. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was steady. It filled the room without a microphone. It was the voice I used to command 500 men on a construction site. I looked down at the box of cigars. Kyle has given me a very interesting gift tonight, I said. He tells me these are genuine Cubans, the best in the world. Kyle nodded, puffing out his chest. But you see, I continued picking up one of the cigars. In my line of work, you learn to spot a fake. You learn that sometimes people wrap a cheap, rotten filler in a fancy leaf and try to pass it off as premium. They think if the label is shiny enough, no one will notice the decay inside. The smile on Kyle's face flickered. The room went very quiet. I crushed the cigar in my hand. It crumbled into dust and dry flakes. Dry, I said, dusting my hands off. Hollow. Worthless. Kyle's face went red. Marcus the First. The shop assured me. I ignored him. I looked out at the crowd. Kyle was just talking about legacy, I said. I heard him discussing the importance of breeding, the importance of evolution. I locked eyes with Kyle. He looked terrified. He realized I had heard him. And I agree with you, Kyle, I said. Family is everything. Blood is everything. When you build a dynasty, you have to be absolutely certain of the materials you are using. You cannot build a skyscraper on a cracked foundation. I turned to Jasmine. She was frozen, her glass of champagne halfway to her mouth. That is why I have made a decision, I announced. In honor of my 73rd birthday, and in honor of the son Jasmine is carrying, I have hired a top geneticist. A murmur went through the room. We are going to create a complete verified family tree, I said. We are going to trace the Thorn lineage back 500 years. And to do that, we need DNA. I saw Jasmine's hand start to shake, so I continued, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. The moment that baby is born, the very second the cord is cut, we will be doing a full comprehensive paternity test. Not just for medical reasons, but to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Thorn blood is pure. I smiled at Kyle, a predator's smile. After all, Kyle, I said, like you said, we don't want any inferior stock mixing in with the legacy, do we? The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear the ice melting in the buckets. Kyle's face was the color of chalk. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Jasmine looked like she was about to faint. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. They knew. In that terrifying moment, they knew that I wasn't just talking about genealogy. They knew that I suspected. But they couldn't say anything. They couldn't object. How could they? If they said no, they admitted guilt. If they said yes, they signed their own death warrants. I raised my glass of water. To the truth, I said, may it always come to light. I drank. No one else drank. Kyle stared at me. His eyes were wide with panic. The arrogant racist who had been preaching about evolution 2 minutes ago was now a scared little boy, realizing the principal had caught him. I put my glass down. Enjoy the party, everyone, I said. I am going to retire to my study. I have some real Cubans in my humidor. I think I will go enjoy one. I walked out of the room. I walked past Kyle. He smelled of sweat and fear. As I climbed the stairs, the jazz band started playing again, but the energy was gone. The party was dead. I went into my study and closed the door. I didn't smoke. I sat in the dark and watched the monitors. I watched Kyle pull Jasmine into a corner downstairs. I watched them whispering frantically. He knows. Kyle's lips moved. I could read them perfectly. The old bastard knows. What do we do? Jasmine cried. If he tests the baby, we lose everything. The trust, the house, the money. Kyle grabbed her arms. We can't let him test the baby, Jazz. We can't let him get to that hospital. What are you saying? I am saying, the timeline has changed. Kyle said, his face twisted into a mask of desperation. We can't wait for nature to take its course. We have to help it along. I leaned back in my chair. Good, I whispered. Panic. Run. Make your mistakes. They were going to try to kill me. Soon. But they didn't know that the man they were hunting was already wearing armor. And the hunt wasn't happening in the jungle. It was happening in a house where the walls had eyes and the victim had a loaded gun. I checked the calendar. Jasmine was due in 2 months. I had 8 weeks to dismantle their lives piece by piece. And the next piece was going to be the most public of all. The gender reveal party. Jasmine wanted pink and blue smoke. I was going to give her fire. But first I had to deal with a medical emergency. Not mine, Jasmine's. Because stress does terrible things to a pregnant woman, and the next morning the ambulance would be screaming up my driveway. And that ambulance ride would give me the one thing I was missing, the physical proof. The sample. The sound of a siren at 2 in the morning is the sound of chaos. It slices through the dark, tearing apart the safety of sleep. When I heard Jasmine scream from the master bedroom, a scream of genuine physical terror, I knew the game had taken a dangerous turn. I rushed into the room, my cane thumping heavily on the hardwood. Jasmine was doubled over on the bed, clutching her stomach. Her face was pale, her skin clammy with sweat. The sheets were stained with a small, terrifying spot of red. The baby, she gasped, gripping my hand with a strength I didn't know she had. "Marcus, something is wrong." For a second, I forgot she was my enemy. I forgot the affair. I forgot the plot to kill me. For a second, I was just a husband seeing his wife in pain, and the instinct to protect kicked in. I called 911. My voice was calm, authoritative. I gave the address. I gave the symptoms. Then I called Kyle. Not because I wanted to, but because he was staying in the guest house, and if I didn't call him, it would look suspicious. He arrived before the ambulance, breathless, wearing nothing but a pair of sweatpants. His eyes were wide. He pushed past me to get to the bed. "Jasmine," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Is it the baby? Is he okay?" He grabbed her hand, pushing mine away. It was a reflex, a moment of panic where he forgot his role as the son-in-law and acted like the terrified father he was. I watched him stroke her hair, whispering frantically into her ear. I stood back in the shadows of the room. I watched the man who wanted me dead comfort the woman who was helping him sharpen the knife. The paramedics arrived in a blur of static noise and flashing lights. They loaded Jasmine onto the stretcher. "I am coming with her," Kyle announced, moving to follow the stretcher. I stepped in front of him. I put my hand on his chest. It was a light touch, but I put all my weight behind it. "No, Kyle," I said. "You stay here. You call Maya. You take care of the house. I am her husband. I will go." Kyle froze. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw the hatred flash in his eyes. He wanted to push me down the stairs. He wanted to be the one holding her hand, but he couldn't. "Of course, Marcus," he stammered, stepping back. "You are right. Go. Save the baby." I rode in the back of the ambulance. I held Jasmine's hand. She was crying, begging God to save the child. "Please," she whispered. "I can't lose him. He is everything." I knew what she meant. He wasn't just a child. He was her paycheck. He was her claim to the Thorne fortune. If she lost the baby, she lost the leverage. We arrived at St. Mary's Hospital. The emergency room doors flew open. Dr. Evans was waiting. I had called him from the ambulance. He looked tired, his white coat buttoned wrong, but his eyes were sharp. "Get her to Trauma 1. Evans ordered the nurses. "I need an ultrasound. I need fetal monitoring. Now." He looked at me. "Wait here, Marcus." I waited in the sterile hallway. The smell of antiseptic stung my nose. It smelled like the field hospitals in Vietnam. It smelled like blood and fear. 20 minutes later, Evans came out. He pulled his mask down. "She is stable, Marcus," he said. It was a partial placental abruption. Minor, but dangerous. We stopped the bleeding. The heartbeat is strong. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. But Evans continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We need to do an amniocentesis to check for lung development and any genetic anomalies caused by the stress. It is standard procedure in high-risk cases like this." I looked at Evans. He looked at me. We didn't need to speak. We had an understanding that went back 50 years. An amniocentesis meant a needle into the womb. It meant extracting amniotic fluid. It meant obtaining pure fetal DNA. "Do it, Evans," I said. "And while you have the sample, run the test." Evans nodded. "I will run it against your profile on file, and I will run it against the sample you gave me from the soda can Kyle threw away yesterday. Go." He turned and went back into the operating room. I sat down on the hard plastic chair in the waiting room. My body felt heavy. My bones ached. A few minutes later, the double doors swung open. Maya and Kyle rushed in. "Dad," Maya cried, running to me. "Is she okay? Is the baby okay?" She hugged me tight. I buried my face in her hair. She smelled like lavender soap, the same soap she had used since she was a teenager. "She is stable," I said. "The baby is fine. Thank you, God," Maya breathed. She pulled away and looked at me, her eyes full of genuine concern. "You look exhausted, Dad. Here, sit down. Let me get you some water." She rushed to the vending machine. I watched her, my beautiful, kind, naive daughter. She came back with a bottle of water. She sat next to me, then she looked at Kyle. Kyle was pacing back and forth, chewing his fingernails. He looked like a wreck. "Honey, come sit," Maya said to him. "You are going to wear a hole in the floor. Jasmine is going to be fine." Kyle stopped. He looked at Maya with a strange expression. It was a mix of contempt and pity. I care about her, you know," Kyle said. "She is family." "I know you do," Maya said soothingly. "You have such a big heart, Kyle. That is why I love you." She reached out and took his hand. She pulled him down to sit next to her. She rubbed his back. I watched my daughter comforting her husband because he was worried about his mistress and their illegitimate child. The pain that hit me then was worse than any physical blow. It was a sharp, twisting agony in my chest. Maya was wiping sweat from Kyle's forehead. She was whispering words of encouragement. She was being the perfect wife. And he was sitting there letting her comfort him, while he planned to steal her inheritance and leave her with nothing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout the truth right there in the waiting room. I wanted to grab Kyle by the throat and smash his head into the wall, but I couldn't. Not yet. If I exploded now, it would be messy. They would deny it. They would spin it. I had to wait for the paper. I needed the science. An hour passed. It felt like a lifetime. Finally, Dr. Evans returned. He was holding a manila folder. He walked straight to me. He didn't look at Kyle. He didn't look at Jasmine, who was being wheeled out to a recovery room down the hall. "Mr. Thorne," Evans said formally, "can I speak with you in my office regarding the test results?" I stood up. I saw Kyle tense up. He wanted to come. He wanted to know. "I will be right back," I said to them. I followed Evans into his small, cluttered office. He closed the blinds. He locked the door. He handed me the folder. I opened it. The paper was crisp. The header read Advanced Genetic Diagnostics. I skipped the medical jargon. I went straight to the bottom. Subject A, Marcus Thorne. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. Subject B, Kyle Anderson. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. I stared at the numbers. 0. 99.9. "There is no margin for error," Marcus Evans said softly. "The genetic markers are identical. The child has the Lynch syndrome gene. It came from Kyle." I closed the folder. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt cold. I felt like a machine that had finally been given the correct programming code. "Thank you, Evans," I said. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I stood up. I tapped the folder against my palm. "I am going to throw a party," I said. I walked out of the office. I walked back to the waiting room. Kyle and Maya looked up. "Is everything okay?" Maya asked. "Everything is perfect," I lied. "The doctor says the baby is strong." "The doctor? In fact, he says the baby is a fighter, just like his father." I looked at Kyle when I said it. Kyle puffed out his chest, smiling. "That is great news, Marcus. Really great news." I walked over to the window. I looked out at the city lights. The baby was fine. Jasmine was fine. They had survived the night, but they wouldn't survive me. I looked at Maya again. She was exhausted, her head resting on Kyle's shoulder. She looked so small, so vulnerable. "I promise you, sweetheart," I whispered to the glass. "I am going to cut the cancer out of your life. It is going to hurt. It is going to leave a scar. But you will live. You will be free." I turned back to them. "Let's go see Jasmine," I said. "I want to tell her the good news myself. I want to tell her that her secret is safe. For now." I walked down the hall, clutching the manila folder against my chest like a shield. The evidence was in my hands. The weapon was loaded. And the countdown to the gender reveal party had officially begun. They wanted to reveal a boy or a girl. I was going to reveal a monster. Let me tell you how I set the stage for the most expensive, most destructive slideshow in history. It involved a 100-inch LED screen, a hacked laptop, and a microphone that I would use to deliver the eulogy for their marriage. You would think that almost losing a child would make a woman humble. You would think that lying in a hospital bed with tubes in your arm would make a person reflect on what truly matters in life. But Jasmine was not a normal woman. She was a creature of vanity, and her recovery did not bring gratitude. It brought a demand for attention that was so large it could barely fit through the double doors of my estate. 3 days after she was discharged from the hospital, Jasmine walked into my study. She looked frail, but her eyes were burning with a feverish intensity. She placed a glossy brochure on my desk. It was for the city's botanical gardens. "Marcus, she said, her voice trembling with staged emotion. I have been thinking. God gave us a second chance. We almost lost this baby. We need to celebrate his life. We need to show the world that the Thorne legacy is strong. I looked at the brochure. I looked at the price tag she had circled in red marker. $100,000. For a party, I asked. Not just a party, Marcus, she corrected me. A gender reveal. The biggest one this city has ever seen. I want helicopters dropping colored smoke. I want a symphony orchestra. I want the mayor to be there. I want everyone who ever doubted me to see that I am the mother of your heir. I leaned back in my chair. $100,000. It was an obscene amount of money to spend on colored smoke. In the past, I would have argued. I would have told her that that money could build a house for a homeless veteran. But today I didn't argue. Because I realized that she was right. We did need a stage. A very big, very public stage. If I was going to execute a man, I didn't want to do it in a dark alley. I wanted to do it in the town square at high noon with everyone watching. You are right, Jasmine, I said, reaching for my checkbook. We should celebrate. In fact, I think 100,000 is not enough. Let's make it 150. I want the best catering. I want the best security. And I want the biggest screen they have available. Jasmine's jaw dropped. She had expected a fight. Instead, she got a blank check. She squealed and ran around the desk to hug me. Oh, Marcus, you are amazing. This is going to be the event of the decade. It certainly will be, I thought as I signed the check. But I have one condition, I said, tearing the check out of the book. The tearing sound was loud in the quiet room. Anything, Marcus, anything you want, I handle the guest list, I said, and I handle the reveal moment. I want to prepare a special video presentation, a tribute to our family history. I want to introduce our son to his ancestors. Jasmine didn't hesitate. She was too blinded by the dollar signs. Of course. That sounds so sweet. You love your history projects. She grabbed the check and ran out of the room to call the event planner. I could hear her screaming with excitement in the hallway. I picked up my phone. I had work to do. I started with the guest list. I didn't just invite friends. I invited witnesses. First, I called my business partners, the board members of Thorne Construction. These were men who had respected me for 40 years. They were also men Kyle had been trying to impress. He had been pitching them his terrible ideas behind my back, trying to set himself up as the future CEO. I wanted them to see exactly what kind of man Kyle was. I wanted them to see him stripped of his dignity. Then I called the Anderson family, Kyle's parents. They were strict religious people from the Midwest. They were the kind of people who went to church 3 times a week and judged anyone who didn't. They had always looked down on me because of my skin color, even though they happily drank my expensive wine. They treated Kyle like a golden prince who could do no wrong. I invited them personally. I told them I had a special surprise that would honor their son. They accepted immediately. Finally, I did something that hurt me, but it was necessary. I invited the entire staff of the elementary school where Maya worked, the principal, the other teachers, her friends. I needed Maya to be surrounded by her peers. I needed the humiliation to be so absolute that she could never ever go back to him. If I exposed him in private, Kyle might be able to talk his way back into her heart. He was a master manipulator. But if I exposed him in front of her boss and her best friends, if I showed the world that he had made a fool of her, she would have to leave him to save her own pride. It was a cruel kindness, like breaking a leg to reset it, but I had no other choice. For the next 2 days, the house was a whirlwind of activity. Florists were bringing in thousands of white roses. Caterers were setting up tasting menus. Kyle was walking around like a peacock measuring the lawn for the helicopter landing. I spent those 2 days locked in my study. I wasn't working on blueprints. I was working on a video editor. I am not a tech wizard, but hate is a powerful teacher. I learned how to splice footage. I learned how to sync audio. I started the video with beautiful photos, pictures of my wedding to my late wife, pictures of Maya as a baby, pictures of me building the skyline of Chicago. It was sentimental. It was touching. It was designed to lower their defenses. Then I added the new footage. I uploaded the clip from the hidden camera in the office, the one where Kyle put his feet on my desk and called me a pathetic old man. I uploaded the clip from the bedroom, the one where Kyle stole the necklace. I uploaded the audio from the birthday party amplified and clarified where he called my family inferior stock. And finally, I scanned the DNA test results. I zoomed in on the numbers, 0% for me, 99% for him. I set it all to music. I chose a classical piece, The Ride of the Valkyries. It felt appropriate. It started slow and built to a chaotic, thunderous crescendo. The night before the party, I sat in the dark and watched the final cut. It was 10 minutes long, 10 minutes that would incinerate 3 lives. Maya knocked on the door. "Dad," she called softly. "Are you okay? You haven't eaten dinner." I paused the video on a freeze frame of Kyle kissing Jasmine. I turned off the monitor before she entered. "Come in, sweetheart," I said. Maya walked in carrying a tray of food. She looked tired but happy. "The garden looks beautiful, Dad," she said. "Jasmine is so excited. Thank you for doing this for her. I know she can be difficult, but she really loves you, and Kyle is so proud to be part of this family." I looked at my daughter. She was arranging the napkin on my lap. She was so good, so full of love. She didn't deserve this. "Maya," I said, taking her hand. "Yes, Dad. No matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know that I love you. You are the only thing in this world that I truly built. The buildings are just concrete. The money is just paper. You are my legacy." Maya smiled, confused. "You are talking like you are going away. You are just revealing the gender of the baby. It is a happy day." "Yes," I said. "It is a day for truth, and truth is the foundation of happiness." She kissed my forehead and left the room. I ate my dinner in silence. Then I saved the video file to a USB drive. I put the drive in my pocket. I patted it. It felt heavier than a gun. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the wind rattle the windows. Tomorrow the elite of Chicago would gather on my lawn. Tomorrow the champagne would flow. Tomorrow the smoke would clear and everyone would see the rubble. I wasn't just an old man anymore. I was the director of their demise. And I was going to make sure that when the curtain fell, there would be no applause, only shock. The morning of the party arrived with a bright, mocking sunshine. The sky was blue, the birds were singing. It was a perfect day for a massacre. I put on my best suit. It was a 3-piece charcoal wool suit custom-made in Italy. I tied my tie with steady hands. I looked at myself in the mirror. "Showtime, Marcus," I whispered. I walked downstairs. The house was buzzing. Waiters were running back and forth. Jasmine was shouting orders at a poor florist. "Change those lilies," she screamed. I said, "Ivory, not cream? Do you want to ruin everything?" She turned and saw me. She put on her fake smile instantly. "Marcus, look, isn't it magical?" "It is certainly something," I said. Kyle walked in from the patio. He was wearing a white linen suit that matched the decor. He looked like a movie star, or a con artist playing a movie star. "Big day, Dad," he said, giving me a thumbs up. "The helicopter pilot is ready. The screen is set up. It is massive. You sure you know how to work the tech?" I tapped my pocket where the USB drive was. "Don't worry, Kyle," I said. "I have everything under control. The presentation is going to be explosive." He laughed. "That is the spirit." I walked out onto the lawn. The guests were starting to arrive. I saw Kyle's parents looking stiff and uncomfortable in their Sunday best. I saw my board members checking their watches. I saw the teachers from Maya's school looking wide-eyed at the luxury of my estate. I greeted them all. I shook hands. I played the host, but my eyes kept drifting to the giant LED screen that dominated the garden. It was a black monolith standing silent and waiting. Jasmine grabbed a microphone. "Welcome, everyone," she chirped. "Thank you for coming to celebrate our miracle baby." The crowd cheered. "We have a wonderful program for you," she continued. "But first, my husband, the incredible Marcus Thorne, has prepared a special video tribute to welcome our son into the family." She gestured to me. I walked up to the podium. I didn't use a cane. I stood tall. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Maya smiling proudly in the front row. I saw Kyle winking at his friends. I saw Jasmine posing for photographers. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the USB drive. I plugged it into the laptop connected to the screen. I took the microphone. "Thank you, Jasmine," I said. My voice echoed across the lawn. "They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I think some pictures are worth much more. Some pictures are worth a fortune, and some are worth the truth." I looked at Kyle. His smile faltered slightly. He sensed a shift in the air. "Please turn your attention to the screen," I said, "and meet the real father of this child." I hit the space bar. The music started. The Ride of the Valkyries. And the first image flashed onto the screen. It wasn't a baby photo. It was a time-stamped security feed of Kyle stealing the necklace. The gasp from the crowd was a physical sound like all the air being sucked out of the garden at once. And that was just the opening act. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violent violet and bruised orange. It was a fitting backdrop for what was about to happen. My garden, which usually smelled of fresh earth and blooming jasmine, now reeked of excess. The scent of $500 bottles of champagne being popped every 30 seconds, mixed with the exhaust fumes of the helicopter hovering in the distance waiting for its cue. Jasmine had outdone herself. She had spent my money with the reckless abandon of a woman who thought the well would never run dry. There were ice sculptures in the shape of pacifiers that were slowly melting onto the imported silk tablecloths. There were waiters dressed in tuxedos circulating with trays of appetizers that cost more than a mortgage payment. Caviar on blinis, truffles shaved over Wagyu beef. It was a feast for the eyes and a famine for the soul. I stood near the edge of the terrace watching the circus. I held a glass of water in my hand, but everyone assumed it was vodka. Let them think the old man needs a drink to get through the night. Kyle was in his element. He had shed his jacket hours ago, rolling up the sleeves of his white linen shirt to show off the Rolex I knew he had bought with the money from the stolen necklace. He was holding court near the bar, surrounded by a group of my business associates. I watched him throw his head back and laugh. It was a loud, performative laugh, the kind of laugh that says, "Look at me, I am the king of this castle." He spotted me standing alone and excused himself from his admirers. He walked over to me, swaying slightly. His face was flushed with alcohol and adrenaline. "Hey there, Papa Bear," Kyle slurred slightly, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You look a little lost. Do you need me to call the nurse? Maybe it is time for your nap." I looked at his hand on my shoulder. I imagined breaking his fingers one by one, but I just smiled. "I am fine, Kyle," I said, "just admiring the view." "You and Jasmine did a wonderful job." Kyle snorted, taking a long swig of his drink. "We did, didn't we? This is how you do it, Marcus. This is style. No offense, but your parties were always so stiff, so old-fashioned. The world is changing. You need to adapt or die." He leaned in closer, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and cheap ambition. "And let's be honest, Marcus," he whispered. "You are closer to the dying part than the adapting part. But don't worry. I will take good care of the Empire. I have big plans. Once the baby is here and you are retired, I am going to modernize everything." Retired. That was the polite word for dead. I looked into his watery blue eyes. I saw the contempt there. He didn't see a man. He saw an obstacle. He saw a wallet with a pulse. "That is very thoughtful of you, Kyle," I said, my voice flat. "But you know what they say. Life is full of surprises." Kyle laughed again, patting my cheek. "You are funny, Marcus. Senile but funny. Just go sit down in the front row. We put a special cushion on your chair, for your back. We don't want you collapsing before the main event." He walked away, snapping his fingers at a waiter to bring him another drink. I watched him go. I felt a tap on my arm. It was Maya. She was wearing a blue dress that matched the party theme. She looked radiant, but tired. She had spent the last 3 hours making sure everyone else was comfortable playing the perfect hostess, while her husband played the playboy. "Dad," she said softly, "are you okay?" Kyle is, well, he is just excited. He doesn't mean to be rude. He has had a little too much to drink. I looked at my daughter. My heart broke for her. She was defending the man who was sharpening the knife to stab her in the back. "I know, sweetheart," I said. "He is just excited. It is a big night." She squeezed my hand. "I am so happy for you, Dad. A son. Can you believe it? After all these years. And Jasmine. She really wants this to be perfect. She worked so hard." She pointed to the stage where Jasmine was shouting at the sound technician. "Make sure the bass drops when the smoke clears," Jasmine yelled. "I want the ground to shake." I squeezed Maya's hand back. "The ground is going to shake, Maya," I promised her. "I guarantee it." Suddenly the music cut out. A drum roll started playing over the massive speakers. Jasmine ran to the center of the stage. A spotlight hit her blindingly bright. She soaked it up, throwing her arms wide as if she were a diva accepting an encore. "Welcome, everyone," she screamed into the microphone. "Thank you for being here for the most important night of our lives." The crowd cheered. The champagne flutes clinked. As many of you know, she continued, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "This has been a hard journey. We almost lost our little miracle last week, but the thorn blood is strong. We are survivors. I saw my business partners nodding solemnly. They bought it. They bought the whole act. And now Jasmine shouted, pointing to the sky. The moment you have all been waiting for. Is it a prince or a princess? The sound of the helicopter got louder. It was hovering right above the garden now, its searchlight cutting through the darkness. Kyle ran up onto the stage, joining Jasmine. He grabbed her waist, pulling her close. They posed for the photographers, the perfect image of a happy young couple. But before we dropped the smoke, Kyle yelled into his own microphone. We have a special treat. My father-in-law, the great Marcus Thorne, insisted on saying a few words. He put together a video montage. You know how old people are with their photo albums. The crowd chuckled. Kyle waved me over. Come on up, Marcus. Keep it brief, okay? The helicopter is burning fuel. I walked up the stairs to the stage. My steps were measured. I could feel the USB drive in my pocket burning against my leg. I stood between them. To my left, the wife who planned to poison me. To my right, the son-in-law who planned to steal my legacy. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the anticipation. They wanted blue smoke or pink smoke. They wanted a show. I stepped to the podium. I adjusted the microphone. I didn't look at my notes because I didn't have any. Thank you, Kyle, I said. My voice was deep and steady. It boomed across the garden, silencing the chatter. Kyle is right. I am an old man. And old men love their memories. We love to look back at the past because it tells us who we are. I paused. I looked at the giant LED screen behind us. It was black, waiting for my command. Tonight we are here to answer a question, I said. The question is simple. Is it a boy or is it a girl? I looked at Jasmine. She was smiling, but her eyes were darting nervously. She sensed the change in my tone. But I continued, my voice growing harder, colder. Science asks deeper questions. Science does not care about blue or pink. Science cares about blood. Science cares about truth. I saw Kyle frown. He took a half step toward me. Dad, he hissed off mic. What are you doing? Just play the video. I am playing the video, Kyle. I said loud enough for the microphone to pick up. I turned back to the crowd. I looked straight at Maya in the front row. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to know that what I was about to do was an act of love, not hate. They say that a child is a reflection of his parents, I said. That a son carries the sins and the virtues of his father. I gripped the podium. So before we see the color of the smoke, I think it is important that we meet the source of the blood. I pulled the laptop toward me. Kyle reached out. Marcus, stop. This isn't the rehearsal. I pushed his hand away. Sit down, Kyle, I commanded. The command was so sharp, so authoritative, that he actually froze. It was the voice of the man who had ordered men to pour concrete into the foundations of skyscrapers. I looked into the camera lens that was broadcasting my face to the giant screen. Tonight, I said, I do not just reveal the gender of this child. I hit the enter key. Tonight, I reveal the father. The screen flickered to life behind me. The music began. The soaring, terrifying strings of Wagner. And the first image appeared. It was massive, 30 feet high. It wasn't a baby picture. It was a black and white security feed dated 3 days ago. It showed the interior of my master bedroom. It showed Kyle Anderson, my son-in-law, opening my wife's jewelry box. It showed him taking the diamond necklace. It showed him looking at the camera and winking. The gasp from the crowd was instantaneous. It wasn't a cheer. It was a sound of collective shock, a sudden intake of breath that sucked the oxygen right out of the air. Jasmine turned around to look at the screen. Her hands flew to her mouth. Kyle stood frozen, his face draining of all color, his mouth hanging open in a silent scream. But I didn't stop there. That was just the appetizer. I hit the next key. The screen changed. Now it was a video from my study. The audio boomed over the expensive speakers, drowning out the helicopter. The old man is losing his edge. Kyle's voice rang out clear as a bell. He is pathetic. I can't wait until he is gone. Be patient, baby, Jasmine's voice replied. After the baby is born, we give him the pill. His heart is weak. A woman in the crowd screamed. Maya stood up in the front row, her hands covering her ears, shaking her head. No, she screamed. No. I watched Kyle. He looked like a rat trapped in a corner. He looked at the crowd, Then he looked at me. "You crazy old bastard," he shouted, lunging for the laptop. "Turn it off." But he was too late. I hit the final key. The screen went black for a second. Then the document appeared, the DNA test. I had highlighted the relevant sections in bright red. Subject A, Marcus Thorne, probability of paternity 0%. Subject B, Kyle Anderson, probability of paternity 99.9%. The numbers were 10 feet tall. They burned into the night sky. I leaned into the microphone. "It is a boy, Kyle," I said, my voice calm amidst the chaos. "It is your boy, and you can pay for him yourself." The glass in Kyle's hand shattered on the stage floor. The helicopter pilot, seeing the commotion but not understanding the context, decided this was the cue. He pulled the lever. Blue smoke exploded over the garden, thick, choking blue smoke that rained down on the screaming guests. It was a beautiful nightmare. The blue fog swirled around us, covering the betrayal in a haze of celebration. I stood still in the middle of the smoke, watching my empire crumble. Jasmine was on her knees sobbing. Kyle was trying to run, but he was blocked by my security guards. And Maya was standing there looking at the screen, looking at the numbers that ended her marriage and saved her life. I walked off the stage. I walked through the blue smoke. I walked straight to my daughter. I took her hand. "Let's go home, Maya," I said. The party was over. But the war had just been won. The blue smoke from the helicopter lingered over the garden like a bruise on the sky, but no one was looking up anymore. Every pair of eyes was locked onto the massive LED screen that I had erected as a monument to their destruction. The silence that had fallen over the crowd was heavy and suffocating, broken only by the crackle of the audio feed coming from the speakers. It was the kind of silence you hear right before a building collapses, the sound of structural failure. I stood on the stage, gripping the podium, my knuckles white but my hands steady. I watched the video playing behind me. It was the footage from my study, the one recorded just 3 days ago. On the screen, 50 feet high, was my son-in-law Kyle sitting in my leather chair, his feet propped up on my desk. Beside him, running her hands through his hair, was my wife Jasmine. The image was so clear you could see the sweat on Kyle's forehead. You could see the greed in Jasmine's eyes. But it was the sound that turned the stomachs of the elite guests gathered on my lawn. I had hired a sound engineer to strip away the background noise so their voices rang out across the estate with terrifying clarity. "He is so stupid," the voice of Kyle boomed over the garden speakers. "The old black man actually thinks I respect him. He is just a wallet with a pulse, Jasmine. A walking ATM machine." On the screen, Jasmine laughed. It was a cruel, shrill sound. "Don't worry, baby," her digital avatar said. "Dr. Evans says his heart is hanging by a thread. Once the brat is born, we switch his pills. One good scare and poof, he is gone." A woman in the front row dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the stone patio, but the sound was swallowed by the voice of Kyle continuing his monologue of hate. "And what about Maya?" Kyle asked on screen, taking a sip of my scotch. "She is going to be a problem. She is always whining, always clinging to me." "We will deal with her," Jasmine replied. "Once Marcus is dead, we kick her out. We tell her the estate is bankrupt. She is too soft to fight back. She will end up in a shelter while we are living in Paris." "I can't wait to see the look on her face," Kyle sneered. "I am going to throw her clothes on the lawn myself." I looked down at Maya. She was standing in the front row, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that defied description. She wasn't looking at the screen anymore. She was looking at the man she had loved, the man she had supported for 10 years. She was seeing him for the first time, not as her husband, but as a monster. Kyle was still on stage with me. He was paralyzed. For a moment he couldn't move, he couldn't speak. He just stared at the screen, seeing his own secret life broadcast to the world. Then the paralysis broke. "It is a fake," he screamed, his voice cracking. "It is AI. He made it up. Turn it off right now." He lunged for the laptop on the podium. His face was twisted into a mask of pure animal panic. But I was ready. I had spent 40 years on construction sites dealing with men much tougher than Kyle Anderson. As he reached for the computer, I stepped in front of him. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't shout. I simply blocked his path with the solid weight of my body. "Sit down, Kyle," I said. My voice was low, but it was picked up by the microphone and amplified to a thunderous command. We are not done yet. Two of my security guards, large men who used to work as bouncers at the toughest clubs in Chicago, stepped out from the shadows. They grabbed Kyle by the arms and forced him back. He struggled, kicking and screaming like a child having a tantrum, but they held him fast. "Let me go!" he yelled. "This is illegal. You can't do this. Jasmine, tell them. Tell them it is a lie." I looked at Jasmine. She was kneeling on the stage floor, her expensive white dress stained with grass and dirt. She wasn't looking at Kyle. She was looking at the ground, shaking her head, muttering no over and over again. She knew there was no way to spin this. There was no lie big enough to cover the truth. I turned back to the audience. You have heard the hate I said into the microphone. You have heard the greed. You have heard how they plan to kill me and destroy my daughter. But there is one more thing you need to see. I looked at Kyle's parents. They were standing near the buffet table, looking as if they had been turned to stone. Their faces were pale, their mouths agape. They had spent years looking down on me, thinking their son was too good for this family. Now they were watching his soul being stripped bare. Kyle questioned the bloodline, I continued. He talked about purity. He talked about evolution. So let us look at the science. I pressed the final key on the laptop. The video of the affair cut to black. The garden plunged into darkness for a split second. Then the screen exploded with white light. It was a document, a single page, scanned in high resolution. At the top it read, Advanced Genetic Diagnostics Center. I stepped aside so the entire crowd could see the numbers. I wanted them to burn into everyone's retinas. I wanted there to be no doubt, no ambiguity. The text was highlighted in bright red. Test subject, unborn male child. Putative father, A. Marcus Thorne. Probability of paternity 0.00%. A gasp went through the crowd. It started as a ripple and turned into a wave, but then their eyes moved down to the next line. Putative father B. Kyle Anderson. Probability of paternity 99.99%. The silence broke. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. People started shouting. Someone booed. I saw the principal of Maya's school turn to her colleague and whisper in shock. I walked to the front of the stage. I looked down at Kyle, who was sagging in the grip of the security guards. All the fight had gone out of him. He was staring at the numbers, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. I pointed at the screen. "There is your legacy, Kyle," I said. My voice was calm, cold, and devoid of mercy. "You wanted to keep the bloodline pure. Well, you succeeded. You kept it in the family. You slept with your mother-in-law. You betrayed your wife. And you tried to pin your bastard child on me." I looked at the crowd. "This man," I said, gesturing to Kyle, "stands here in a suit I bought, wearing a watch he bought with stolen money, and preaches to me about breeding. He thought I was a senile old man. He thought he could cuckold me and kill me and take everything I built." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. But he forgot one thing. I am Marcus Thorne. I don't lay foundations on rot. And I certainly don't pay for other men's mistakes. I turned to the security guards. "Get him off my property," I ordered. "And take her with him." I pointed at Jasmine. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Marcus, please," she sobbed. "I can explain. It was a mistake. He forced me." I looked at her with zero emotion. I didn't see the woman I loved. I saw a stranger. "You have 1 hour to clear your things out of the house," I said. "Anything left after 60 minutes will be burned on the front lawn. And don't bother looking for the deed to the Florida house. The ink faded 3 hours ago. It is just a blank piece of paper now, just like your future." The guards dragged them away. Kyle was weeping now, begging for mercy, begging Maya to help him. Maya didn't move. She stood like a statue watching him go. The screen behind me was still glowing with the DNA results, the damning numbers illuminating the night. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Dr. Evans. He had been standing in the wings, ready in case my heart gave out. "Are you okay, Marcus?" he asked. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of ozone and expensive perfume and justice. "I am fine, Evans," I said. "I have never been better." I walked down the stairs of the stage. The guests parted for me like the Red Sea. No one dared to speak to me. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. They knew they had just witnessed an execution. I walked straight to Maya. She was trembling. Her face was pale, her eyes red. I didn't say anything. I just opened my arms. She collapsed into me. She buried her face in my chest and sobbed. It was a guttural, heartbreaking sound. The sound of a life breaking apart. I held her tight. I stroked her hair just like I did when she was a little girl and scraped her knee. "It is over, baby," I whispered. "The poison is out. It hurts now, but it is over." She looked up at me. Her eyes were filled with pain, but also with clarity. "He is the father," she whispered. "My husband is the father of... She couldn't say it. "Yes," I said, "but he is not your husband anymore, and that child is not your burden." I looked around the garden. The party was in ruins. The food was uneaten. The champagne was warm. The guests were fleeing to their cars, desperate to escape the fallout. I didn't care. I had burned it all down. The marriage, the false happiness, the lies. And from the ashes I would build something new, something real. "Let's go inside," I said to Maya. "We have a lot of work to do." As we walked back toward the house, leaving the giant screen glowing in the darkness, I felt a strange sense of peace. I was 72 years old. I was single. I was alone. But for the first time in years, I was free. However, the story didn't end there. Kyle wasn't the type to go quietly, and Jasmine wasn't the type to accept poverty. The legal battle that followed would be brutal, but they made one fatal mistake. They sued me. They actually tried to sue me for defamation. Let me tell you what happened when they walked into the courtroom and realized that the judge was a woman who had once worked on one of my construction crews. The look on their faces was worth every penny I spent on legal fees. The chaos that erupted in my garden was not the joyous kind Jasmine had paid $150,000 to manufacture. It was the chaos of a battlefield immediately after a bomb has dropped. The blue smoke, which was supposed to symbolize the arrival of a male heir, hung thick and heavy in the air, tasting of sulfur and broken dreams. Through the haze, the giant LED screen continued to burn with the cold, hard light of the truth. Those numbers, 0% and 99%, were the only stable things in a world that was rapidly disintegrating. I stood at the edge of the stage, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I watched the shockwave ripple through the crowd. I saw the waiters stop dead in their tracks, trays of champagne tilting dangerously. I saw my business partners, men who had seen hostile takeovers and market crashes, looking pale and shaken. They knew they were witnessing something far more brutal than a bankruptcy. They were witnessing the total annihilation of a family. But the sound that cut through the noise of the murmuring crowd was the sound of a body hitting the grass. Maya. My daughter had been standing in the front row, staring up at the screen, with eyes so wide they looked like they might bleed. She had seen the video of her husband and her stepmother. She had heard the vile things they said about her. She had seen the DNA results that proved her entire marriage was a lie. The human mind can only process so much trauma before it simply shuts down to protect itself. Maya didn't cry out. She didn't scream. She simply folded. Her knees gave way and she collapsed onto the manicured lawn like a marionette whose strings had been cut. "Maya," I shouted. Forgetting my cane, forgetting my age, I moved toward the stairs, but the crowd was already swarming around her. "Get a medic," someone screamed. "She isn't breathing." My heart stopped. For a terrifying second, I thought I had miscalculated. I thought that in my quest to destroy the wolves, I had accidentally killed the lamb. I pushed through the crowd, shoving billionaires and socialites aside with the strength of a desperate father. "Let me through!" I roared. "That is my daughter." I reached her just as a young doctor, one of the guests, began to check her pulse. He looked up at me, his face grim. "She is alive, Mr. Thorne. It is just a vasovagal syncope. Extreme shock." She fainted. "We need to give her space." I knelt beside her in the grass. Her face was ashen. She looked so young, so defenseless. Anger, hot and molten, flooded my veins. This was their fault. Kyle and Jasmine had done this to her. I looked up, scanning the chaos for the perpetrators. I saw the Anderson family first, Kyle's parents, the people who had judged me for my skin color, the people who had raised their son to believe he was a prince among peasants. They were not rushing to the stage to help their son. They were not rushing to Maya to help their daughter-in-law. They were running. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson were power-walking toward the valet stand, their heads down, their faces burning with shame. They were stepping over the dropped hors d'oeuvres, ignoring the calls of their friends. They were fleeing the scene of the crime. They realized that their son's disgrace was now their disgrace. The illusion of their moral superiority had been shattered by a 30-foot video of their son stealing jewelry and plotting murder. I watched them go. Run, I thought. Run back to your country club. Tell them how the black bricklayer dismantled your dynasty in 10 minutes. Then my eyes found Jasmine. She was on the stage screaming like a banshee. She wasn't screaming for forgiveness. She was screaming at the machine. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, clawing at the air. "It is a lie. It is deep fake. Marcus, turn it off." She lunged toward the laptop on the podium, her fingernails extended like talons. She wanted to smash the computer as if destroying the hardware would somehow erase the truth that was now burned into the minds of 200 witnesses. But she never reached it. My head of security, a man named Bruno, who stood 6 feet 5 inches tall, stepped in her path. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, a wall of muscle and black Kevlar. "Step back, Mrs. Thorne." Bruno said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Get out of my way, you idiot," Jasmine screamed, striking his chest with her fists. "Do you know who I am? I am the mistress of this house. I will fire you. I will ruin you." "You are trespassing," Bruno said calmly. "Mr. Thorne has revoked your clearance." Jasmine spun around looking for an ally. She looked for Kyle. Kyle was still being held by 2 other guards near the base of the stage. He had stopped fighting. He was sagging in their grip, staring at the ground, tears streaming down his face. He looked pathetic. The arrogant stride was gone. The sneer was gone. All that was left was a coward who had been caught. I stood up from Maya's side. The doctor nodded to me, indicating she was stabilizing. I smoothed my jacket. I picked up the heavy manila envelope that had been sitting on the podium. I walked over to Kyle. The crowd parted for me. They went silent again. They wanted to see the final blow. I stood in front of him. I could smell the sweat and the expensive cologne turning sour on his skin. "Look at me, Kyle," I commanded. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red and swollen. "Marcus, please," he whimpered. "I can explain. It was the alcohol. I didn't mean it. Jasmine, she seduced me. She made me do it." I laughed. It was a short, dry bark of a laugh. "She made you steal my wife's necklace. She made you call my daughter useless. She made you plan my murder. I never—" "Shut up, Kyle," I said. I raised the envelope. It was thick. It contained 3 documents. First, a petition for divorce on behalf of my daughter Maya. I had her power of attorney for emergency situations, and I considered this an emergency. Second, a restraining order barring him from coming within 500 feet of any Thorne property or family member. And third, a civil lawsuit for fraud, embezzlement, and emotional distress seeking damages of $5 million. I slapped the envelope against his chest. It made a solid, heavy thud. "Take it," I said. He fumbled with it, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. "What is this?" he whispered. "This is your inheritance," I said. I leaned in close, so only he in the front row could hear me. "You remember what you said at the birthday party, Kyle? You were bragging about your family history. You said you had the Lynch syndrome gene because it was an aristocratic disease. You said it proved you came from superior stock." Kyle flinched. "Well, congratulations," I continued, my voice dripping with ice. "You passed that gene on to your son. But today I am giving you a new legacy. I am giving you a new disease to pass down." I pointed to the envelope. "It is called poverty, Kyle. And unlike Lynch syndrome, this one isn't genetic. This one is earned. I am going to take every dime you have. I am going to take the Mercedes. I am going to take the golf clubs. I am going to garnish your wages for the rest of your miserable life to pay back what you stole from me." I looked at Jasmine, who was now being restrained by Bruno. She was sobbing, her makeup running in black streaks down her face. "And you," I said to her, "you wanted the Florida house. You wanted security." "Marcus, I am pregnant," she wailed. I am carrying a baby. You can't throw me out, I can, and I am," I said. "You have the baby. Kyle can pay for it. If he can find a job, maybe the circus is hiring clowns." I turned back to the guards. "Get them out of here," I ordered. "Throw them out the front gate, and if they try to come back, call the police. I have the video evidence of grand larceny and conspiracy to commit murder ready to hand over to the district attorney." "Please, Marcus," Kyle begged as the guards began to drag him away. "My parents left. I have no ride. I have nowhere to go." "Walk," I said. "It will build character." I watched as my security team hauled them down the long driveway. Jasmine was kicking and screaming. Kyle was dragging his feet like a dead man walking. The guests watched them go. No one offered them a ride. No one offered them a tissue. These people were sharks, and they knew a corpse when they saw one. I turned back to Maya. She was sitting up now, sipping water supported by the doctor. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with pain, but the fog of confusion was gone. She saw the truth. I walked over and sat on the grass beside her. I didn't care about my $3,000 suit. "I am sorry, baby," I whispered, putting my arm around her. "I am so sorry you had to see that." She rested her head on my shoulder. She was trembling. He hated me, Dad," she whispered. "All this time. He hated me." "He didn't hate you, Maya," I said gently. "He just didn't have the capacity to love anyone but himself. You were an object to him, but you are a treasure to me." I looked up at the screen. The numbers were still there. 0, 99. "Turn it off," I said to the technician. The screen went black. The numbers vanished. The blue smoke had finally cleared, leaving only the crisp night air. I looked at the crowd. They were still standing there, unsure of what to do. "The party is over," I announced, not bothering to stand up. "Please go home. There is no cake. There is no celebration. There is only the garbage that needs to be taken out." Slowly, the guests began to disperse. They moved quietly, whispering to each other, clutching their phones. I knew the video would be all over the internet by morning. I knew Kyle and Jasmine would be pariahs before sunrise. I didn't care. I stayed on the grass with my daughter. We sat there for a long time, watching the stars come out. Dad Maya asked after a while, "Yeah, honey. What do we do now?" I looked at her. I saw the strength in her jaw that she had inherited from her mother. I saw the resilience she didn't know she had. Now I said, "Now we rebuild. We check the foundation. We clear the rubble. And we build something that can't be knocked down by liars." I stood up and helped her to her feet. "Come inside," I said. "I think Mrs. Higgins is coming back to work tomorrow. She makes the best hot chocolate." We walked toward the house, leaving the empty champagne glasses and the melting ice sculptures behind us. The nightmare was over. But the legal war was just beginning, and I had one more surprise for them. They thought being broke was the worst punishment. They had no idea. Wait until they found out about the insurance fraud investigation I had triggered an hour ago. That was the one that wouldn't just bankrupt them. That was the one that would put them in a cage. You would think that after being exposed as adulterers and thieves in front of the entire elite society of Chicago, my wife and my son-in-law would have the decency to disappear. You would think that the shame of having their naked greed broadcast on a 30-foot screen would send them running for the hills. But I underestimated the sheer audacity of desperate people. 3 days after the party, I was sitting in my study drinking my morning coffee when the doorbell rang. It wasn't the police. It wasn't an apology letter. It was a process server. I opened the heavy envelope with my letter opener. Inside was a lawsuit. Kyle Anderson and Jasmine Thorne were suing me. The charges were laughable yet infuriating. Invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation of character. They were demanding $10 million in damages. They claimed that by recording them in my own home and broadcasting it, I had violated their civil rights and caused them irreparable psychological harm. I read the document and I started to laugh. It was a deep, rumbling laugh that came from the belly. They thought the war was over. They didn't realize that I hadn't even fired my heavy artillery yet. They wanted a legal battle. Fine. I would give them a war that would leave scorched earth where their futures used to be. The deposition was scheduled for the following week at the offices of their lawyer, a slimy man named Mr. Henderson who wore a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too wide. I arrived with my attorney Harrison. Harrison walked with the quiet confidence of a man who carries a bazooka in his briefcase. When we walked into the conference room, Kyle and Jasmine were already there. They were sitting on one side of the long glass table, looking smug. Kyle was wearing a neck brace. He claimed he had suffered whiplash from the stress of the party. Jasmine was wearing black, acting like a grieving widow, even though her husband was sitting right across from her, alive and well. "Mr. Thorne," Mr. Henderson began, leaning back in his chair, "you have admitted to recording my clients without their consent in what they had a reasonable expectation was a private space. The video evidence you showed is inadmissible in court, and frankly, it constitutes a felony wiretap. We are prepared to settle for $8 million and the immediate reinstatement of Mrs. Thorne into the family home." I looked at Kyle. He smirked at me. He mouthed the words, "Pay up, old man." I looked at Harrison. Harrison didn't say a word. He just opened his briefcase. He took out a stack of files thick enough to choke a horse. He placed them gently on the table. The sound of the heavy paper hitting the glass echoed in the silent room. Mr. Henderson Harrison said, his voice calm and professional. Before we discuss the civil suit regarding privacy, let us discuss the doctrine of unclean hands. You see, your clients are suing for damages to their reputation. But to have a reputation damaged, one must first have a reputation to lose. And frankly, your clients do not have reputations. They have rap sheets. Kyle's smirk vanished. What are you talking about? I have never been arrested. Not yet, Harrison said. He slid the first file across the table. Let's start with you, Mr. Anderson. My client hired a forensic accountant and a private investigator 3 weeks ago. We did a deep dive into the finances of that tech startup you were pitching to Mr. Thorne and his daughter. Kyle shifted in his seat. The neck brace suddenly seemed very uncomfortable. It turns out, Harrison continued, that the company Future Tech Solutions does not exist. It is a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The bank account associated with it is solely in your name. That is a lie, Kyle stammered. It is a holding company. Standard business practice. Is it standard practice? Harrison asked to take $20,000 from your wife Maya Thorne for seed money and immediately transfer it to an online gambling site. Maya gave me that money, Kyle shouted. It was a gift. It was an investment. Harrison corrected him. Soliciting funds for a fake investment is called fraud, Mr. Anderson, but that is the small stuff. Let's talk about the big stuff. Harrison slid another paper across. We audited the accounts for the gender reveal party. Mr. Thorne gave you complete control over the budget. You claimed the helicopter cost $15,000. The invoice here shows the actual cost was $4,000. You claimed the catering was $50,000. The caterer confirmed they charged $20,000. In total, you siphoned over $60,000 of Mr. Thorne's money into your personal account under the guise of event planning expenses. Kyle's face turned the color of ash. That is embezzlement, Harrison said. And since you used the internet to move the funds, it is also wire fraud. That is a federal crime, Mr. Anderson. We are talking about 10 to 20 years in federal prison. Kyle looked at his lawyer. Do something, he hissed. Stop him. Mr. Henderson looked at the documents. He closed his folder. He knew a losing hand when he saw one. I cannot defend against criminal evidence presented in this manner, he muttered. But we aren't done, Harrison said, turning his gaze to Jasmine. Jasmine shrank back in her chair. I haven't done anything, she whispered. I am just a pregnant woman. You are bullying me. Harrison slid a file toward her. It was thinner, but deadlier. Mrs. Thorne, do you recognize this police report? Jasmine looked at it. Her hands started to shake. This is the report you filed last week claiming your diamond necklace worth $50,000 was stolen by the housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins. You signed a sworn statement. You also filed a claim with the insurance company State Farm seeking full reimbursement. So what? Jasmine said, her voice rising in panic. It was stolen. The old maid took it. Harrison pulled out a plastic bag. Inside was the pawn ticket I had bought from the shop on Cicero Avenue. This is a pawn ticket, Harrison said, dated the same morning the necklace went missing. It is signed by Kyle Anderson. We have video footage from the pawn shop of Mr. Anderson selling the necklace. Jasmine looked at Kyle. You sold it, she screamed. You told me you put it in the safe deposit box for cleaning. Kyle looked down, avoiding her eyes. I needed the cash, he mumbled. For the trip. Harrison interrupted them. Here is the problem, Mrs. Thorne. You knew Kyle took it. We have the audio recording from the bedroom where you discussed using the insurance money to fund a nursery. Filing a false police report is a crime. Filing a fraudulent insurance claim is a felony. Jasmine burst into tears. Real ugly tears. Not the fake ones she used to manipulate me. But I am pregnant, she wailed. You can't send a pregnant woman to jail. The judge will decide, that Harrison said. But as for the civil suit, he pulled out the final document, the prenuptial agreement. Clause 17, Harrison read. The infidelity clause. In the event that the spouse is found to be engaging in an extramarital affair resulting in pregnancy by another man, all claims to the estate are null and void. The spouse shall leave the marriage with only the personal items they entered with. He looked at Jasmine over his reading glasses. You entered the marriage with a Honda Civic and 3 suitcases of clothes. I suggest you start packing them. The room was silent. The air was thick with the smell of total defeat. Then the door to the conference room opened. 2 police officers walked in, followed by a detective I recognized. Kyle Anderson and Jasmine Thorne, the detective said, holding up a warrant. "You are under arrest." Kyle jumped up. No, you can't do this. My father knows the mayor." The officer didn't care who his father knew. He grabbed Kyle's arms and spun him around. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Jasmine tried to run behind her lawyer. "Don't touch me," she screamed. "I am high risk. My baby." The female officer was gentle but firm. "We have a medical transport waiting outside, ma'am. But you are coming with us. Insurance fraud and conspiracy to commit theft are serious charges." I sat there and watched. I watched the man who called me a stupid old bricklayer being dragged out in cuffs, crying like a baby. I watched the woman who planned to stop my heart being led away, clutching her stomach, realizing that the golden ticket she carried in her womb was actually her ticket to a prison ward. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer they had hired, stood up and started packing his bag. He didn't even look at them. He knew he wasn't getting paid. I stood up. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. I saw the police cars waiting. I saw the flashing lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Harrison stood beside me. "Well, Marcus," he said, closing his briefcase. "I think that went well." I nodded. "They sued me for invasion of privacy," I said, watching them being shoved into the back of the squad cars. Harrison chuckled. "It is ironic, isn't it? They wanted privacy. Now they are going to have a whole lot of it, in a 6x8 cell." I walked out of the office. The sun was shining. The air was crisp. I took a deep breath. I felt lighter. The weight of the deception, the weight of the fear, it was all gone. I took out my phone and called Maya. "It is done, sweetheart," I said. "They are gone." "Is it over?" she asked, her voice small and fragile. "Yes," I said. "It is finally over." I got into my car. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove. I drove past the construction sites I had managed, past the skyscrapers I had built. I looked at the concrete and steel, and I felt a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. I had built a legacy. And when the termites tried to eat it, I didn't just patch the holes. I burned the nest. I was 72 years old. I was alone, but I was standing on solid ground. And as for Jasmine and Kyle, well, let's just say that the justice system isn't as easily manipulated as an old man in love. The trial that followed was short, brutal, and public. But the best part wasn't the verdict. The best part was the letter I received from Jasmine 6 months later from prison. She wanted forgiveness. I sent her a reply. It was a single sheet of paper, a copy of the blank deed to the Florida house. Some debts can never be paid, and some bridges are meant to be burned. This is Marcus Thorne signing off. If you are ever tempted to let your guard down because you think you are safe, remember my story. Trust is good, but verification is better. And never ever underestimate the man who built the roof over your head, because he knows exactly how to bring it down. The police lights had faded into the distance hours ago, but the silence they left behind was heavier than the noise. My estate, which had been a carnival of blue smoke and champagne just a few hours earlier, was now a graveyard of plastic cups and shattered illusions. I sat in the living room watching the fireplace. I hadn't turned on the gas logs. Instead, I was watching the real wood burn the crackle and pop, providing the only rhythm in a house that felt stopped in time. Maya was lying on the sofa, wrapped in an old quilt my first wife had stitched by hand 40 years ago. She wasn't sleeping. Her eyes were open, staring fixedly at a spot on the ceiling. She held a mug of hot chocolate in her hands, but she hadn't taken a sip. The steam had long since stopped rising. I sat in the armchair opposite her. My cane was leaning against my leg. My body ached from the adrenaline crash. I was 72 years old, and I had just dismantled 3 lives in one evening. I was tired. But a father does not get to be tired when his child is bleeding, even if the wound is on the inside. I didn't speak. I knew the rules of grief. If you speak too soon, you interrupt the processing. You have to let the reality sink in until it hits the bottom. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Maya blinked. A single tear rolled down her cheek, following the path of the hundreds that had come before it. "He called me useless, Dad," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, like she had been screaming for days. I leaned forward. I didn't tell her not to think about it. I didn't tell her it wasn't true. I validated her pain. I heard him, baby, I said softly. He said I was clinging to him. She continued, her voice trembling. He told his friends that I was a burden, that he was just waiting for you to die so he could throw me out. She sat up slowly, the quilt falling from her shoulders. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw the anger beneath the sorrow. I paid for his car, Dad. I paid for his clothes. When he wanted to go on those golf trips with his buddies, I worked extra tutoring shifts to fund them because he said he needed to network. I cooked his meals. I ironed his shirts. I listened to him complain about how the world didn't appreciate his genius. She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. And all that time he was laughing at me. He was sleeping with Jasmine in my childhood home and laughing at how stupid I was. I moved to the sofa and sat beside her. I took the cold mug from her hands and placed it on the table. Then I took her hands in mine. They were cold as ice. You were not stupid, Maya, I said, looking her in the eye. You were loyal. You were loving. You projected your own goodness onto a man who had none. That is not a flaw. That is a virtue. The only tragedy is that he didn't deserve it. But I didn't see it, she cried, pulling her hands away to cover her face. How could I not see it? The late nights, the money disappearing, the way he looked at her. I was blind. We were both blind. Sweetheart, I said. He fooled me too. He sat at my table and called me father. He drank my wine and shook my hand. Sociopaths are good at what they do. They mirror what we want to see. Maya stood up. She began to pace the room. The shock was wearing off and the adrenaline was kicking in. I want him gone, she said. He is gone, Maya. The police took him. No, she said, shaking her head vigorously. I want him gone, completely. I don't want to see a single thing that reminds me of him. I don't want his smell in this house. I don't want his ghost haunting these halls. She looked at me with a fierce determination I hadn't seen in years. Can we burn it, Dad? I looked at her. I saw the fire in her eyes. It was the same fire I had felt when I stood on that stage. Burn what I asked. Everything she said. Every single thing he left behind. I stood up. I picked up my cane. I walked to the fireplace and grabbed a box of long wooden matches. I tossed them to her. She caught them. Let's go, I said. We walked up the stairs to the guest wing. This was where Kyle and Jasmine had been staying while they waited for the renovation of the master suite. The air in the hallway still smelled of his cologne, a musky, expensive scent that used to signal family to me, but now smelled like betrayal. Maya pushed the door open. The room was a mess. The police had let them take a few essentials, but most of their belongings were still there, scattered in the haste of their arrest. Maya walked to the closet. She yanked the door open. Inside hung row after row of suits. Armani, Hugo Boss, Zegna, thousands of dollars of Italian wool and silk, all paid for by me, all maintained by her. She grabbed a handful of hangers and pulled. The sound of the hangers scraping against the metal rod was harsh and satisfying. She threw the suits onto the floor. He loved these suits, she said, breathless with exertion. He used to stand in front of the mirror for hours adjusting his tie, asking me if he looked powerful. He thought the clothes made the man. She grabbed more. Shirts, trousers, ties. She stripped the closet bare. She moved to the dresser and pulled out the drawers, dumping them onto the pile. I didn't help her. This was her exorcism. I just stood in the doorway and bore witness. She moved to the bedside table. She swept his watch collection into a pillowcase. She grabbed his expensive grooming kit. She grabbed the framed photo of them on their wedding day that sat on the nightstand. She looked at the photo for a long moment. Then she smashed it against the corner of the dresser. The glass shattered. She pulled the photo out, crumpled it, and threw it onto the pile of clothes. Help me carry this downstairs, she said. We made 5 trips. We hauled the mountain of fabric and leather out the back door to the stone fire pit in the center of the patio. The same patio where hours ago guests had sipped champagne. We piled it high. It looked like a funeral pyre. Maya stood looking at the mound. It was 10 years of her life. It was every birthday gift, every anniversary present, every sacrifice she had made to keep him happy. She picked up a bottle of lighter fluid from the outdoor kitchen. She squirted it over the clothes. The smell of the chemical mixed with the night air. She struck a match. For a second, the flame flickered in the wind, fragile and small. Then she dropped it. The fluid caught instantly. A whoosh of orange flame shot up, illuminating her face. Maya took a step back, the heat radiating against us. We watched as the fire consumed the lies. The silk ties curled and blackened. The expensive wool suits smoked and turned to ash. The leather shoes crackled and popped. I saw Maya's shoulders relax. For the first time all night, she took a deep breath. "He said I was useless," she whispered to the fire. I put my arm around her shoulders. "He was wrong," I said. "You are the one who is still standing. He is in a cell and you are standing in the light. That is not useless. That is victorious." We watched the fire for a long time. The smoke drifted up into the night sky, carrying away the toxicity of the last decade. Dad, Maya asked, her eyes fixed on the flames. "Do you think I can start over? I am 40 years old. I have no husband. I have no money of my own. I feel like I wasted half my life." I turned her to face me. The firelight danced in her dark eyes. "Maya, listen to me. You are 40 years old. That means you have 40 more years to live. You are smart. You are kind. And you are a thorn. We build things. That is what we do. If a building falls down, we don't sit in the rubble and cry. We clear the lot and we build something taller, something stronger. But I don't know who I am without him," she admitted. "I spent so long trying to be the wife he wanted." "Then that is the exciting part," I said. "You get to find out. You get to meet Maya. I think you are going to like her." "I certainly do." She smiled. It was a small, weak smile, but it was real. She looked back at the fire. The pile was reduced to glowing embers now. The physical traces of Kyle Anderson were gone. All that was left was ash. "I am going to go back to school," she said suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. "School?" "I want to get my master's in administration," she said. "I love teaching, but I am tired of being powerless. I want to become a principal. I want to run a school. I want to be in charge." I smiled. That sounded like my daughter. "I think that is a brilliant idea," I said. "And I know a certain scholarship fund that would be happy to cover the tuition." She laughed, a genuine laugh. "Thank you, Dad, for saving me. I was drowning and I didn't even know it." I kissed her forehead. "You saved yourself, Maya. I just turned on the lights." We stood there until the fire died down to nothing but gray dust. The sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. It was a new day, a clean day. "Let's go inside," I said. "We have a meeting with the lawyers at 10, and after that we are going shopping." "Shopping?" she asked, confused. "Yes," I said. "You threw away all your clothes too, the ones he liked, the drab ones. It is time you dressed like a woman who runs things." Maya looked down at her clothes. She was wearing an old gray sweater that Kyle had told her was practical. "You are right," she said, pulling at the hem. "I hate this sweater." She took it off right there and threw it onto the dying embers. "Good riddance," she said. We walked back into the house hand in hand. The house was still messy. The floors were still sticky with spilled champagne. But the air felt different. It felt lighter. It felt like a home again. As I watched my daughter walk up the stairs, her head held high, I knew she was going to be okay. The weak woman who begged for $20,000 was gone. In her place was a survivor. And as for me, I had one more piece of business to attend to. The trial was coming up, and while the video at the party was damaging, I had one final nail for the coffin, a piece of evidence that Kyle had forgotten about entirely. It was a voicemail he had left on his mistress's phone 3 months ago. A voicemail that my private investigator had retrieved from the cloud. If Kyle thought the party was humiliating, wait until he heard his own voice in a federal courtroom, describing exactly how he planned to launder the insurance money. But that is a story for the next chapter. For now, I was just happy to watch the sun rise on a house that was finally clean. 6 months is a long time in the construction business. In 6 months, you can lay the foundation of a skyscraper. You can demolish a city block. Or you can watch a life completely disintegrate. I was sitting in the first-class lounge at O'Hare International Airport swirling a glass of sparkling water when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my old private investigator, Vince. He liked to keep me updated even though I had stopped paying him weeks ago. He said he enjoyed watching Karma work. He sent me 2 photos. The first photo was taken inside County General Hospital. It wasn't the private suite Jasmine had picked out in the glossy brochures. It wasn't the room with the ocean view and the personal doula. It was a crowded ward with peeling paint on the walls and fluorescent lights that hummed like dying insects. Jasmine was lying in a narrow bed. She looked 10 years older. Her hair, which used to be perfectly styled, was matted and dull. She was holding a baby. I zoomed in. There were no flowers in the room, no balloons, no visitors. Just a tired woman in a hospital gown that had been worn by 1,000 strangers before her. Vince had attached a note, born at 3 a.m. male. The doctors confirmed the diagnosis immediately. I put the phone down and looked out at the tarmac. Jasmine had wanted a legacy. She had wanted a child with noble blood. Well, she got exactly what she asked for. The baby had tested positive for Lynch syndrome, just like the prenatal test predicted. But unlike Kyle, who had lived in denial, the baby was showing early complications. I knew what that meant. It meant specialists. It meant surgeries. It meant a lifetime of expensive medication. In the old days, Jasmine would have just swiped my credit card. She would have hired the best doctors in Switzerland. But she didn't have my credit card anymore. She didn't even have health insurance. Because when she was arrested for insurance fraud, the policy was voided. She was now a single mother with a criminal record, living in a studio apartment she could barely afford, facing medical bills that would drown her before she even learned to swim. I didn't feel happy about a sick child. I am not a monster. But I felt a cold, grim satisfaction about the justice of it all. Jasmine had tried to kill me to get my money. Now she needed that money more than ever, and she would never touch a cent of it. She would spend the rest of her life working double shifts at a diner just to pay for the aristocratic genes her lover had passed down. She was calling nurses, screaming for pain medication, but in a county hospital you get what they give you and you wait your turn. There was no Marcus Thorne to yell at the staff for her. There was just the cold, hard reality of the system she used to look down on. I swiped to the second photo. It was a mugshot. Or rather, a prison ID photo. Kyle Anderson. Inmate number 78,429. He wasn't wearing an Armani suit. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that washed out his pale skin. His head was shaved. The lush hair he was so vain about was gone, probably due to lice regulations. But it was his eyes that told the story. The arrogance was gone. The sneer was gone. In their place was pure, unadulterated fear. Vince's note for this one was shorter. He is having a hard time in C Block. He owes protection money to the Latin Kings. He is washing laundry for 5 cents an hour. I closed my eyes and imagined it. Kyle, the man who bragged about his breeding, the man who called my family inferior, was now at the absolute bottom of the food chain. In prison, race and class don't matter in the way he thought. Strength matters. Loyalty matters. And Kyle had neither. He was weak. He was a snitch. He was a man who stole from his own family. In the prison code that made him garbage. I heard he had tried to tell the other inmates that he was a victim of a conspiracy, that a powerful billionaire had framed him. They laughed at him, and then they took his commissary money. He used to drink 50-year-old scotch. Now he was drinking toilet wine made from fermented fruit cups. He used to sleep on Egyptian cotton sheets. Now he slept on a steel cot with one eye open, praying that the cell door stayed locked. He wanted to be treated like a king. Now he was the court jester of the state penitentiary. I deleted the photos. I didn't need to save them. The images were burned into my mind. Mr. Thorne. I looked up. Maya was walking toward me holding 2 cappuccinos. She looked different. The hunched shoulders were gone. She was standing tall, wearing a tailored blazer and jeans. Her hair was cut short in a bob that framed her face. She looked like a woman who ran things. Because she was. In the last 6 months, Maya had transformed. She had started her master's program. She had taken over the administration of my charitable foundation. She was fierce. She was smart. She was terrifyingly efficient. "Here, Dad," she said, handing me the coffee. "They just called our flight. Are you ready?" I took the cup. I looked at the gate information. Flight 802 to Paris. "Am I ready?" I asked. I was born ready. We were leaving Chicago. I had sold the estate 3 days ago. It wasn't a hard decision. That house was a museum of betrayals. Every room held a memory I wanted to forget. The dining room where they played footsie under the table, the study where they plotted my murder, the garden where the blue smoke choked the sky. I sold it to a young tech billionaire from Silicon Valley. He wanted to gut it and turn it into a smart home. Good luck, I had told him as I handed over the keys. Make sure you check the foundation. I kept nothing. The furniture, the art, the cars, I sold it all. The money went into a new trust fund. Not for a baby, but for Maya. And for the scholarship program we were building for underprivileged kids in the city. We were homeless in the best possible way. "Where are we going first, Dad?" Maya asked, sitting down next to me. I pulled out the map we had marked up. Paris first, I said. You always wanted to see the Louvre, then Rome. I want to show you the Colosseum. I want to show you how real empires were built, and then, maybe Tokyo, or Bali, wherever the wind takes us. Maya smiled. It was a smile that reached her eyes. The shadow of Kyle was gone. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was my daughter. You know, she said, looking out the window. I got a letter from him. Yesterday. From prison. I stiffened. Kyle. What did he want? I asked, my voice hardening. He wanted money, she said simply. He said he needs it for the canteen. He said he is starving. He said he is sorry and he still loves me. I looked at her. And what did you do? Maya took a sip of her cappuccino. She looked calm. I burned it, she said. I didn't even finish reading it. I just lit a match and dropped it in the sink. I smiled. That is my girl. We stood up as the boarding call began. I picked up my carry-on bag. It was light. I had left the heavy baggage behind. The anger, the need for revenge, the bitterness, it was all back there in the ashes of the estate. I was 73 years old now. Most men my age were slowing down. They were sitting on porches waiting for the end, but I felt like I was just starting. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the departure gate. The old lion looked back. He had a few scars. His mane was gray, but his eyes were clear. He had defended his pride. He had protected his cub, and now he was going to see the world. Come on, Dad, Maya said, linking her arm through mine. Adventure awaits. I walked down the jet bridge, leaving the city of Chicago behind. Somewhere in that city, a woman was crying in a hospital bed, realizing that her greed had cost her everything. Somewhere in that state, a man was shivering in a cell, realizing that his arrogance had built his own cage. And here on this plane, an old bricklayer and his daughter were flying toward the sun. I sat in my seat and buckled the belt. I closed my eyes. For the first time in a year, I didn't have to watch my back. I didn't have to check the cameras. I didn't have to taste my food for poison. I was safe. And as the engines roared to life and the plane lifted off into the clouds, I finally allowed myself to rest. The price had been paid. The debt was settled, and the account was closed. The Mediterranean Sea has a color that you cannot find in a paint chart. It is a blue so deep and so rich that it feels like you are looking into the soul of the world. I sat on the deck of the chartered yacht, my legs stretched out, my face turned toward the sun. The salt air filled my lungs, cleaning out the last remnants of the stale perfume and lies that had choked me for so long in Chicago. For the first time in 40 years, I did not have a schedule. I did not have a board meeting. I did not have a construction site to inspect, and most importantly, I did not have to watch my back in my own home. The only sound was the rhythmic hum of the engine cutting through the waves and the cry of a distant seagull. Maya was sitting a few feet away near the railing. She was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and reading a book on Roman architecture. Every few minutes she would look up at the coastline and smile. It wasn't the polite, forced smile she used to wear when Kyle made a joke at her expense. It was a real smile, a smile that reached her eyes. She looked younger. The stress lines around her mouth had smoothed out. She looked like the girl I raised before the world tried to break her. I took a sip of my iced tea. People back home probably pitied me. They probably whispered about poor Marcus Thorne, the 72-year-old man who lost his young wife and his fortune. They probably thought I was sitting somewhere broken and lonely, mourning the life I had lost. They could not be more wrong. I didn't feel loss. You don't mourn the loss of a tumor. You don't cry when the surgeon cuts out the rot that was killing you. You celebrate. You take a deep breath and you thank God that you are still standing. I looked at the empty chair across from me. 6 months ago, Jasmine would have been sitting there. She would have been complaining about the wind messing up her hair. She would have been taking selfies to post online, desperate for the validation of strangers. She would have been calculating how much this boat cost and how much of it she would get when I died. Now the chair was empty, and that empty space was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was space for peace, space for silence, space for truth. I thought about the estate, the massive house on the hill that I had built as a monument to my success. I realized now that it was never a home. It was a stage where bad actors performed a tragedy and expected me to pay for the tickets. Selling it was the best business deal I ever made. I didn't need 20,000 square feet of marble and mahogany. I needed this. I needed the sun on my face and my daughter by my side. Dad, Maya called out, pointing toward the horizon. The captain says we will be in Positano in an hour. Are you ready for some pasta? I laughed. I am always ready for pasta, sweetheart, especially if you are buying. She giggled. It was a sound I hadn't heard in a decade. We had plans, big plans. We were going to tour Italy, then we were going to set up the new foundation. Maya was going to run it. We were going to find bright young kids from neighborhoods like the one I grew up in and give them full rides to college. We were going to build a legacy that wasn't made of bricks and mortar, but of human potential. I realized that at 72, I wasn't at the end of my story. I was just starting the best chapter, the chapter where this hero stops fighting dragons and starts enjoying the kingdom. I looked down at my hands. They were old hands, weathered, scarred. They had poured concrete. They had signed million-dollar contracts. They had held a dying wife. And they had signed the papers that sent 2 criminals to prison. They were strong hands. I closed my eyes and listened to the waves. I thought about Kyle in his cell. I thought about Jasmine in her small apartment. I hoped they were learning. I hoped they were understanding that the easy way is always the hardest way in the end. But honestly, I didn't think about them for long. They were just dust in the rearview mirror. A shadow fell over me. Maya was standing there. She leaned down and kissed my cheek. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "For what? For giving us a second chance." I patted her hand. "We earned it, baby. We fought for it." She went back to her book. I looked out at the vast, endless ocean. I felt a surge of power in my chest. It wasn't the aggressive power of a young man trying to prove himself. It was the quiet, unshakable power of a man who knows exactly who he is. I picked up my glass and raised a toast to the horizon. To the old lion. He may walk a little slower. He may sleep a little more. But when the hyenas come circling thinking he is weak, thinking he is easy prey, they find out the truth too late. Don't ever think that age dulls the claws of a lion. It only teaches the lion how to hunt in silence. Trust requires verification, especially when wealth is involved. Marcus's story teaches us that unconditional love should never mean unconditional blindness. By ignoring the red flags, the disrespect from his son-in-law, and the entitlement of his young wife, he almost lost his legacy. However, his wisdom prevailed. The true strength of a man isn't in how much he can provide, but in his courage to cut off those who exploit him. Family isn't just blood, it is loyalty. When loyalty is broken, the relationship is void. Protect your peace. Protect your assets and never underestimate the power of silence. If this story satisfied your justice cravings, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I want to know where you are watching from, so drop your city in the comments below. Have you ever had to cut a toxic family member out of your life? Tell me your story. I read every single comment. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your circle small.